Hello everyone and welcome to fSobriety. I am Craig Woods and this is my co-host.
Hello, I am James Hamilton and you're listening to episode 6 of fSobriety. We made it to 6 episodes so far.
We made it 6 whole episodes, how about that?
That's wild.
And James, what are we going to be chatting about today, this evening, whatever time this is? Time is relative now.
I guess it depends on, time-wise, on what time people are listening to it.
Either way, it's still the end times.
During this end times, we are going to be discussing a smorgasbord, I think, right? Is that how it's pronounced?
A Fargo's board.
Yep, of Season 4 of Noah Hawley's Fargo.
Yeah, and this is a treat, really, because you are a Fargo virgin prior to this. Is that true?
That is absolutely correct. Well,
you don't mind confessing that on air?
Obviously, I saw the film, because,
yeah.
everyone has. But I never watched the TV show.
Yeah.
Until the start of this season. Mm-hmm. And I've got to say, really enjoying it. As we both know, both of us were big fans of Legion, Noah Hawley's other big TV show for the FX network. And so yeah, it's weird that I'd never watched Fargo before, but having watched the first 4 episodes of season 4 so far, I am enjoying it a lot.
Yeah, good stuff. And one of the quite fun things about Fargo is, first of all, it's kind of an anthology show, so every season is an entirely different story, so you are free to jump on any season, but there is strong connective tissue between each of the seasons. What the position you're in is quite kind of fun in a way. There's the opportunity for you to watch each of the previous seasons now in chronological order in terms of narrative, because this season 4, it's set in the early 50s, and that's the earliest we've been in the history of this show. So your next port of call in that case would be season 2, which is set in the late 70s. And without giving anything away, there are a few things in this new season which seem to have implied direct connections to season 2. But before we get into any of that, James, how have you been and what have you been up to? It's been a while since we last spoke. I think it's over 2 weeks since we last recorded an episode, so what gives?
Well, since we last recorded an episode, I was a bit ill, but not with a case of the Roman poets, as I'm calling COVID. There's a historical pun for you. You can look that one up at home if you want.
A certain section of the listenership are just absolutely ecstatic at that pun.
No, so I was sick for a few days.
But like a true hero, you soldiered on through, braver than, say, someone fighting in a war zone.
Indeed. However, because of that, we put back a recording because I didn't want to try and record when I was going to be even lower energy than normal. And also, in terms of focus, I wasn't really focused on editing. So by the time people hear this, they should hopefully, ideally, have heard episode 5, which isn't out while we're recording this because it's taken me a while to edit it. So, if it seems like there's a longer gap between episodes than normal, it's because there is. How about you?
Not too bad. I've been working, getting by. This week I've been watching The Haunting of Bly Manor on Netflix, which, got to be honest, is actually quite successfully spooky. I don't know if you saw, did you see The Haunting of Hill House?
I did not see The Haunting of Hill House, but you have recommended this to me before.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's by your man Mike Flanagan, who is a bit of a horror renaissance man. He's put out the odd misfire here and there, but by and large his stuff is pretty solid. I actually really enjoy him as a director. Both the Haunting seasons have really strong characterization, very atmospheric, very well put together. The first one, as the title suggests, was kind of loosely inspired by the Shirley Jackson novel, and this second season is kind of a bit more of a direct adaptation of Henry James' Turn of the Screw, but not entirely. It's still quite loose, but it resets the action to the 1980s, which is quite an interesting choice. Yeah, it's pretty solid. I went into it not expecting too much. It's very different from the Shirley Jackson first season. That first season had a lot of kind of jump scares and a lot of it was very upfront in its horror elements right from the start. Well, this one, it starts off way more subtle. And I read quite a few reviews from people online who were all a bit lukewarm on it, and I gotta be honest, I am way more impressed with it than most of them seem to be. But yeah, I suggest checking it out. But don't watch it by yourself in the dark like I did, because I did actually get a bit creeped out, and that does not happen to me very often.
Alright, I'll put that on the spoopy list then.
I also finally got around to watching the entries in the Marvel Cinematic Universe that I'd not got around to watching, namely Captain Marvel and the other one that I call Spidey on Holiday because I forget the real title. Yeah.
Well, what did you think of them? What did you think of Marvel's Gen X then?
I'm a bit middling on it. More like Captain Marvel and Spider-Man. I don't think either of them were bad, but neither of them were great. They were okay. Of the two, I definitely enjoyed Captain Marvel more. Spider-Man felt a bit unnecessary. I just wasn't. I was disappointed in that one because I did really enjoy the first one. But hey ho, it is what it is, guys.
I would have to say the two of them are two of my favourite MCU
Oh,
movies.
really? Wow,
yeah.
okay.
I loved Captain Marvel. I thought it was great. Not just because of all the 90s bullshit that was in it.
I
But
was going to bring that up.
to be fair, I do want to see my all-powerful superheroes wearing 9 Inch Nails t-shirts, because why wouldn't you?
If it works for Cliff Steele, then it should also work for Carol Danvers.
Yep. And what else? Yeah, I thought Far From Home was really fun. I think, though, I really enjoyed Far From Home for the ending more than anything. Spoiler alert for, Spider-Man Far From Home, if you've not seen it. The return of classic J. Jonah Jameson.
Yep, the old J.K. Simmons. Yeah, it was quite fun seeing him back in that role, albeit it's a kind of rejigged version of the character. But yeah, no, I did quite like that. But I don't know, the whole movie felt a bit unnecessary. Although I guess, how necessary is any Marvel movie? The point, I guess, is, are they fun? Usually they are. I just felt these ones were a bit middling. But I have to say, I know this is maybe a controversial and unpopular opinion, but towards the latter part of the MCU cycle that we've been through, I've been a bit underwhelmed. I actually was one of those few people who did not seem to enjoy Endgame that much. I actually found it a bit of a slog to sit through.
You didn't enjoy all the action figures being smashed together?
Right, yeah, there was a lot of that, and I get why people enjoy that stuff. I just found it a bit also to quote myself from our previous episode, and I also just I've always had a problem with Iron Man in the MCU. I think he's a really problematic character in a lot of ways, and I do not buy his act of heroism in Endgame. It's not enough for me to regard Tony Stark as being an all-round hero. I still think he's a complete dickhead.
Craig, I'm sorry, man. You're going to have to deal with the fact that selfless, heroic Tony Stark is the Iron Man of 2020.
Yeah, it's no longer Arnold Stark. Here's a hip reference for the kids. Anyway, this is not an MCU podcast, so this is a conversation for another time. We are going to get started on talking about Fargo in just a moment. I do want to make mention of something, though.
Before we do that, I never mentioned the films that I watched while I was a bit unwell.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I decided to, when you're feeling a bit rubbish and you just eat junk food, I like to do it with movies and stuff, so I watched the 2010 remake of Clash of the Titans.
Oh,
which I'd never seen before, and which was a staggering achievement in that it, I think, toppled Zack Snyder's Sucker Punch off of my much coveted worst film I've ever seen list.
Wow.
Utter shite, pure tripe. Like, fuck everyone involved in that movie, and I'm including Mads Mikkelsen in that because he should have fucking known better.
Well, I'll try and contain my amazement at this revelation. I've also just finished reading a great book called Terraformed by Joy White, which is a brilliant set of essays giving a lot of insight into the effects of gentrification and racism and the Forest Gate area, Newham in London. And Joy White is an amazing writer, and it shifts the way that she creates this narrative where she kind of ties together the activism of the 70s and 80s and the kind of reggae sound system culture that was around at the time, and brings it full circle and in simpatico with talking about grime in the 21st century.
Wait, Craig, is this an episode?
It is not. Do you want to talk about Fargo or not? Come on, James, we can't mess around here.
Right, we have limited
this is
time.
This is a very serious and succinct podcast. But But yeah, I highly recommend it. It is an amazing book, and it highlights things like, you know, the police stop and search, the racist stereotyping of black youth and all that kind of thing. It's written in a really... she's actually an academic, but it's not written in an academic style at all. It's got a very particular kind of prose about it, and it really highlights current issues and in ways that are a lot more engaging than just an ordinary academic text would do. It's definitely one of the most vital reads that I've read in this hell of a year so far. So highly recommend it. So we are going to get started on Fargo in just a bit, but I think, James, considering it has been a wee while since we last spoke, and the 2020 is just a never-ending cavalcade of absolute hells a pop and madness and horror, there are... to quote FBI Special Agent Dale Cooper, Sheriff, we've got a lot to talk about.
Yes, we do.
I think the last time we spoke was pre-COVID Trump.
I thought you were going to say pre-COVID. I was going to say it wasn't that fucking long back.
And we're now supposedly quote-unquote post-COVID Trump. What is going on, man? Stop 2020, I want to get off.
He had a great time. He beat it, man. He single-handedly defeated COVID with his strength, with his skin tone. If Regeneron ever becomes available over here, man, I'm going to get me some of that. I'm going to become a fucking transformer.
I'm going to get my tits on Regeneron.
I'm going to power the fucking arc with the Regeneron.
This whole thing, man. It's this episode of Spitting Image sucks. Actually, I can't even say that anymore because now Spitting Image has returned. Did you see that?
I did. I only saw one scene from it, and it sucked. So.
Yeah, the one that I saw was it was Greta Thunberg doing the weather, and I was like, "This is just reactionary bullshit." Like, what? In what way is this satire? This is just 100% punching down. So, nah, fuck a Spitting Image.
It made me a bit sad because I'm sure Spitting Image was satirically sharp once upon a time. Who knows? Maybe it's just our childhood memories.
I think so, but I don't... Yeah, no, I mean, this is it. We grew up in the 80s when it was a thing, and obviously we were kids at the time, and everybody talked about it as if it was very sharp, and certainly in retrospect, a lot of cultural commentators have still kind of hailed it as something that used to kind of regularly spear the Tory government and whatnot. But I don't know, man. I need to go back and look at it again. It might be worth looking at the old stuff and seeing just how sharp the teeth were on it, because maybe they weren't that sharp. But certainly this new stuff, nah, I'm good.
Is it the same writing team from the original series?
I will admit I'm not sure. I don't actually know.
Like your Ian Hislops and whatnot?
I think Hislop might be involved, but speaking of Ian Hislop, anything he's involved in, if he is involved in this, I'm always a bit sceptical about, because I mean, Ian Hislop is exactly in the class of people now that he used to satirise, and he has been for a very long time. And have I got news for you on which he is, a constant mouthy star? It really, in the past decade or so, it's done such a great job of giving platforms to people that probably shouldn't really even be given platforms, at least not on that regular. I mean, how many fucking times did we see Nigel Farage on Have I Got News for You? If he wasn't on there, then it was usually in the alternating week when he was on Question Time. So, yeah. Basically what I'm saying is, fucking Ian Hislop.
Yeah, I can see with their approach to having him on, like maybe once or twice, because they're like, we can bring this guy on, and we can fucking destroy him on TV.
Well, the idea, I guess, ostensibly was to lampoon him, but I don't know how much lampoonery is really involved in constantly giving a platform to someone like that. And it's... I actually also credit Have I Got News for You for the humanisation of Boris Johnson in a lot of people's eyes, because he did present it several times.
And they were all like, ho, Boris.
Oh, Boris, exactly. Oh, you japester. And that did a lot of damage, I think, in making Boris... One of the worst things about Boris is that he's able, to this day, to still conceal his own very malignant history as a major reactionary figure with this schoolboyish, buffoonish persona that the BBC helped him cultivate. So, yeah, no, I've got a lot of very complicated feelings where all that stuff's concerned, and it does make me think that, the new Spitting Image is coming from a very similar place. But I don't know. I've not seen enough of it to judge that for sure. But that's just the impression I got. We also have to talk about, there was also a vice presidential debate in which the real star was a fly.
Yep, I would love to have been a fly in the hair in that debate. I saw screenshots of it, and it literally looked like Pence was a corpse. It was fucking horrific.
It's just so bizarre, man. Like, I'm at a point now where every single day I'm like, is reality scripted and who by? Is Charlie Brooker scripting every single episode of reality, every single episode of 2020? Because there's just too much. It's too much, man. It's like when a formerly exciting TV show gets into its later seasons, and the writers just start throwing all the wacky shit at the wall. And I'm just at a point where I'm like, no, this is too much. You're stretching the credulity. You're breaking the rules of your own concept. And I feel like the writers of 2020 are just doing that now. By the time I saw that fly in Pence's hair, I'm like, see, that on its own would be kind of funny, but around all the other fucking nonsense that's going on in the world, I'm just like, no, give me a break.
2020 is being scripted currently by, I think the writers of Life got sacked. And got replaced by the people who write scripts for like WWE.
That makes sense. After I saw it, I was like entertaining myself with just scenarios, but like a kind of Brundlefly scenario where Mike Pence just absently stumbles into a telepod. What
just
most people don't.
Onto the desk during the debate is like, "Oh, I'm sorry, that was disgusting."
That is my favourite line from that movie. As much as people have been joking about it, I think we need to, the serious thing that we all need to be aware of is that fly wasn't all probability a Russian bot feeding instructions into Mike Pence's ears. That's a joke, by the way, guys. I don't really believe that.
Yeah, come on, QAnon listeners, fucking calm down. This
is not the Alex Jones podcast. One of my favourite tweets of the many about this debacle was from Aparna Nancherla, who is one of my favourite comedians. You, James, may also know her as the voice of Hollyhock in BoJack Horseman. But she tweeted during it, "If you remain unconvinced by his weak arguments, at least Mike Pence has the charisma of a computer screen that froze when you're trying to close a spreadsheet." Another thing that happened just recently was the whole thing about the ISIS Beatles. And really this is only noteworthy in this sense because of the headline that kept popping up with ISIS Beatles. Two ex-British alleged IS suspects, they appeared in US court charged with the killing of 4 American hostages. Really, there's nothing fun about the story itself. It's as dire and horrific detail-wise as you would expect. But every time I saw that headline, I'm just like, this is peak 2020. Why did they keep using that phrase, ISIS Beatles? And the only reason was just because these two guys were so revered amongst, I don't know, I guess jihadis have their fan clubs. These guys were literally the ISIS Beatles. Unfortunately, I reckon the coverage of the ISIS Beatles is likely only going to inspire a new wave of like-minded would-be jihadis to form a tribute act, and they'll just double down on all the worst aspects of the original, and they'll go by the name ISIS Oasis.
Oh.
That's the best joke in this podcast, everyone.
So if they're the ISIS Beatles, then does that make your average American soldier, I was going to say the American Mark Chapman, but I mean the new Mark Chapman, hey, there we go. That joke was in poor taste, whatever way you look at it.
Yeah, I'm not forgiving you for that one.
Did I ever tell you about my idea? In today's environment, where the music industry is in flames and dying along with most of the other entertainment industry, not a lot of work for tribute bands nowadays. I know people who are in tribute bands and stuff, and I always thought it would be good to do a Mark Chapman tribute, where I would just turn up wherever Beatles tributes were performing and kill the John Lennon. But no one ever booked me for a gig.
Well, 2020 is not over yet, James.
2020 has been going for about 4 years. So
Speaking of the music industry, been a lot of deaths, notable deaths in the past couple of weeks as well since we last spoke. And maybe one of the most, one that really caught my eye, even though I'm not remotely a fan, was Eddie Van Halen.
I was quite sad by the death of
I was
Eddie
quite
Van
sad
Halen.
as well, and it's one of those things. I'm not a fan of Van Halen's music. I don't hate it or anything. Like, if I hear it, like if I hear Jump in a club and I'm drunk, you believe me, I'll fucking love every second of that song.
You might as well jump. If it comes on.
You know what, James? I might as well. And so, he will always... there's that element where it was just such that all of that music was such a huge part of the backdrop of the era in which I grew up, and so you cannot really escape that kind of nostalgia. So yeah, a wee part of me died when I heard Eddie Van Halen had died.
Do you know what made me particularly sad about that? The fact that Eddie Van Halen died the same year that they did the long-awaited third Bill and Ted movie.
Oh, true enough.
It means Wild Stallions will never have Eddie Van Halen on lead guitar.
So many missed opportunities. And that, James, is really the biggest tragedy of 2020. One of my favourite tweets about this, and I forget who it was. I wish I'd made a note of who said it, but I think it was some US comedian. But the tweet, I've made a note of the tweet. It was, I loved Van Halen so much growing up, and to be honest, I haven't listened much as an adult. But listening all day yesterday, I realised what makes them great, and that's that every song sounds like a dog wearing sunglasses. Never sure a word tweeted. And speaking of other deaths, Clark Middleton, who was, as we will remember, James, he played Charlie in Twin Peaks: The Return, the long-suffering supposed husband of Audrey Horne. Charlie finally put on his coat and crossed the threshold. I was quite sad to learn that. It was pretty
saddening, yeah. He was great in The Return.
He was amazing, yeah, and he brought such a unique presence in a show that has no shortage of unique presences. And so much of what Lynch did with those scenes, the way he managed to create such an otherworldly feel in nothing more than the mundane setting of a couple of rooms in a house. And I think Clark Middleton and Sherilyn Fenn had such a great back and forth. They had a great chemistry together that everything just felt... It was one of those classic Lynch things where it's a very mundane setting, but the way everything's lit and the way everything's staged, you're never quite sure of the geography of the room, and you're never quite sure how deep the shadows are in the unlit parts of the room. And I loved Clark Middleton's performance because he felt like... And in fact, it was doubled down on in the dialogue because, of course, we get that bit where he calls up quote unquote Tina, and we only get his side of the conversation. But the way Clark Middleton played that character was someone in full confidence that he knew what he was talking about, and he was quite convinced that Audrey had no idea what she was talking about. And we, the audience, are just left completely in the dark. But we hang on to his every word because he's the only one in the scene that has any kind of modicum of authority. And I love that performance. And I think I said to you, I think last week when I heard about it, was it makes me sad that if there ever is a more Twin Peaks, that he will not be part of it because he's one of several characters I would love to have seen again.
Yeah, it would have been great to see more Charlie, but his story's come to an end.
On that point, actually, David Lynch did say just last week that had it not been for the pandemic, he has something that he would have been working on. He did not say what it was, but he did say he would have been working on something. So, I don't know. I guess we're left to speculate. Also died in the same period was Bunny Lee, a great reggae producer, which will mean nothing to you, James. But Bunny Lee was a legend, and he really did a lot to solidify what became the classic dub sound in the 70s. Yeah, so much sadness. Such a sadness, as David Lynch would say. Yep. Such a sadness. Not quite the same as a human death, but you know what else died last week? Netflix's Glow.
Not to be confused, dear listener, with the Glasgow-based reality TV show of the same name.
I don't even know what that is.
It was a short-lived Glasgow equivalent of like Jersey Shore or...
Really? Wow,
yeah.
Okay.
It was just like, it was several episodes long and just full of the worst cunts in Glasgow. I'm sure there's snippets of it on YouTube if you search hard enough. It's just, it's fucking awful.
Former cast members of Glasgow's Glow, if you're listening, we apologise. I don't endorse any of James's very critical words there. But yeah, Netflix's 80s set drama about the gorgeous ladies of wrestling. I'm really sad that's ended because it was one of the best things on Netflix. And it had a great cast, was really smartly written. It's one of the few shows as well that was almost entirely female cast. And the cast were really strong, the writing was so smart. And it's your Alison Brie and your Betty Gilpin, both of whom were amazing. And Mark Maron was great in it as well. I was surprised he didn't snag a few acting awards for his work in it, although admittedly, he is playing only a slightly exaggerated version of himself, but it is still such a great performance. I'm really going to miss that show, and it sucks that they left season 3 on such a cliffhanger that will now never be resolved. But
you never know, 25 years from now.
Glow the Return, directed by 120-year-old David Lynch.
It's weird that I've never watched that show because I've heard nothing but good things about it.
I highly recommend it.
I will watch anything with Alison Brie in it as a rule, and yet I've never watched Glow.
Also among the cast is Sunita Mani, or as we know her, Trenton from Mr. Robot.
Ah. Whenever I hear the title, I just think of that fucking reality TV show. And I'm just immediately put off by it. I have like a Pavlovian response to the word. I'm like, bleh.
I see.
If I think of it as being called Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling, then...
Yeah, I think that's the way to go. You would absolutely love it. There's nothing about that show that you would not enjoy. I can confidently say. Sunita Mani news, though, apparently her career nonetheless is on an upswing because she's got a couple of movies coming out this year, one of which is a satirical alien invasion comedy called Save Yourselves. And apparently she's also been writing her own show in quarantine, so see what happens there. I know this because I follow Sunita Mani because I've loved her since Mr. Robot.
Speaking of Mr. Robot and Sam Esmail, as we do quite a lot on this podcast, I finally got round to starting watching Homecoming.
Oh, cool.
Of which listeners may or may not know, he directed the entire first season.
He did.
I'm only 3 episodes in so far, but it's fantastic. It's got a lot of like Mr. Robot-ish elements. Put it this way, if it's got that font...
you know you're in Esmail Town when it's that font.
Yeah, and it's got a camera shot going down between like a strangely shaped flight of stairs following a character.
We're definitely in Esmail Town.
Yep, and it's got Frankie Shaw and Bobby Cannavale in it, then hell yeah.
It's a great show. It's peak Esmail in that it's really unique in the same way that Mr. Robot is unique. And even though he didn't write Homecoming, he makes every episode of that first season, and it's just visually and aesthetically is peak Sam Esmail. I mean, the storyline is kind of see when you're trying to explain that show to someone, it's a tough thing to do because they're just like, I don't know what any of these words are you're saying. I'm not even going to attempt to do it here, but if you're not familiar with the show, just do check it out. If you enjoyed Mr. Robot, you enjoyed Mr. Esmail, Mr. Sam Esmail Robot. If you enjoy his style of filmmaking, then by all means get in about it because it is a great show.
Julia Roberts is fantastic so far in season 1. I didn't know it was based on a podcast.
Yes, yeah. I've never heard the podcast, but
I wonder if that explains the half-hour format.
Maybe, yeah.
Because as we know, podcasts as a rule are pretty short. Thanks for listening, guys. We'll get to Fargo in a minute.
We are going to talk about Fargo in just a bit. We're going to get to Fargo. Before we do, though, have you been listening to anything good since we last spoke?
Okay, you see, I thought I should make an effort to listen to more new music, given that we discuss music on a regular basis.
Seems
on this
that
show.
way.
I've listened to nothing new in the last couple of weeks. Nothing. All I've listened to in the last 2 weeks is Carly Rae Jepsen and Shakespeare's Sister. So, take it away. What am I missing?
I've been listening to, as far as new releases go, some good new hip hop stuff. In fact, James, is this an episode of fSobriety?
I think it might be. Cue the music.
Hello everyone and welcome to fSobriety, the podcast in which we discuss all things contemporary hip-hop, and the show which also once upon a time might have been called fSobriety, but we decided against that due to its similarity to something Bill Cosby might say. So, the new Sarok album is amazing. It's called The Sharecropper's Daughter, and I'm going to say the magic thing, James, that's going to get you're going to prick your ears right up.
Let me just interject here briefly for a second to reassure our listeners that this isn't like the other podcast that we sometimes host on this network called fSobriety, where Craig has to convince me to like a genre of music. I am a big hip hop fan. Yeah, I just haven't listened to any new hip hop in the last couple of weeks. Carrying on, tell me those magic words.
It's very 90s.
Oh yes.
but very, very 90s in the very conscious hip-hop kind of way. But you know what to expect from Sarok.
Yeah.
Her beats are always a bit kind of retro, but there's always that... one of the things I've always loved about her stuff is that there's always strong melody in the beats. And she's able to use her voice melodically. But as an MC, she's generally pretty aggressive and pretty hard. And I enjoy the combination of that with the fact that she is very much all about kind of peace and positive thinking and very much in tune with African spirituality and stuff like that. But her vocal style is just so hard and aggressive, and the tone of her voice is just so hard. Yeah, it's a great album, and every single track is solid, so I highly recommend that. I've also lately been digging an artist called Backwash. That is spelled Backxwash, so backswash if you like, but it is actually just pronounced backwash.
Back times wash.
And Backwash is a trans rapper, and the voice, man, is amazing. Jesus Christ, the voice is so good. The beats are very hard, very aggressive. Are you familiar with Mickey Blanco?
Yes, I am.
Similar to some of the more aggressive side of Mickey Blanco, but there's almost a kind of metalcore vibe to parts of it. And the lyrics and the way, combined with the way everything's mixed, there's a real kind of nihilistic industrial vibe to it. It feels very of the moment. It feels very 2020, let's put it that way. It's up there with Moormother and what does the hell of 2020 sound like. I've really been digging it a lot, so yeah, I recommend that. Also in hip-hop news, I've also been really digging Nova's EP Re-Up. Nova, or Nova Scotia The Truth, as she's also known, as a Glasgow-based rapper. And she's up for the Scottish Album of the Year award this year. So
that's where I recognise the name from. I was trying to think.
Yeah, I saw her last year supporting Ocean, who are a great hip-hop duo. And she was amazing. I didn't know of her at all before that, but she's a great live performer, and I'm really digging that EP.
Nice. I've got to say, I'm tragically under familiar with Scottish hip hop. Obviously, I know Young Fathers basically, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'd even call Young Fathers hip hop. I love Young Fathers, I think they're great, but I don't know if we would. I mean, certainly there's hip hop elements for sure, but I don't know if you could realistically just describe them as hip hop. I know some people try and do that just because I think here's a collective with some black guys in it. Let's call it hip hop. I feel like it is very lazy on the part of a lot of musical commentary. There is definitely hip hop elements for sure, but Young Fathers are great. But yeah, Nova, recommend her, or Nova Scotia The Truth, whichever name she happens to be using on whatever particular day. But as you know, James, if there's one thing for sure, I will always love any female artist of colour with the word Nova in their name.
Indeed.
And that wraps it up for this episode of fSobriety. Toodle pep.
I know normally when we come out of these segments, we segue back in as if it was a separate segment that we didn't just record, but I can't believe that you finished a segment about hip-hop with the phrase toodle pip.
It's like I went out of my way to be the whitest guy possible on a podcast. Toodle pip. That's your hip-hop news, guys. Toodle pip. That's your update on those rap singers that they have now.
How do they do that talking over the music?
Heavens.
Man, the facade is full. Pay no attention to the men behind the curtain.
So other music news, I think I mentioned this to you before, James. I've really been digging that new Alicia Keys album.
Yeah, I mean, don't worry, listeners. We'll get to Fargo in a bit, but
we are going to start on Fargo just shortly.
But I mean, you mentioned the Alicia Keys album, and
wait, James. Is this an episode of
fSobriety?
Feels like it is.
Cue the music.
Hello and welcome to another edition of fSobriety, a podcast in which we discuss all things contemporary R&B, as the title suggests. So James,
tell me about this new Alicia Keys album that you've mentioned not once but twice in recent episodes. It must be really doing it for you.
It is really doing it for me. I'm really digging it a great deal. And not that I've disliked Alicia Keys in the past. I've always appreciated her talent a great deal. But something about this new album, just I cannot stop listening to it. It is imaginatively titled Alicia, so good one, Alicia.
Stylistically, I'm intrigued to know, how does it compare to her older work? Obviously everyone knows that song that she did with the Jay-Z sampled. The name escapes me. It
does have more of a contemporary kind of tinge. There are a few interesting collaborations on it. Tierra Whack turns up.
Nice.
Sampha and Miguel also turn up. So it does have a bit more of a contemporary swing in that direction. Tierra Whack's verse is peak Tierra Whack. It's top quality. She could read a phone book and I would think it was amazing. I mean,
is Keys still tinkling the keys? Is she still?
She is indeed. Yes. Yeah. Jill Scott also pops up. So there's also still the throwbacks to the classic era. It's a really strong collection of songs, and it is, for the most part, is still very much recognisable contemporary R&B soul. You will love the reggae track, James. There's a reggae track in there.
Wait, is this an episode of
fSobriety within an episode of fSobriety? That would be crazy. We've got to get to Fargo, James. Let's stop messing. James, stop messing around.
Yeah. Well, we're on an episode of fSobriety. During the week, you sent me a pretty excellent link.
Oh, is this about her signature guitar?
Indeed it is.
Oh, it's so good. H.E.R has a Fender signature guitar, and she is the first black female artist ever to have a Fender signature guitar, which on the one hand is super cool, but on the other hand is fucking weird.
That it's taken that long.
Really fucking strange. But anyway, I mean, H.E.R is an absolute virtuoso on the guitar, so I mean, I suppose there are not too many of them, male or female, but that's not stopped them from dishing them out to not quite virtuoso male guitarists in the past. So I don't know, I guess it depends on what your idea of a guitar hero is, but yeah, it definitely seems like there should have been a couple more black women prior to this. But over the moon to see her get one. She's a force for good in this world, and I'm glad that it always makes me happy that someone like her exists in the mainstream in the 21st century, because she is 100% doing her own thing. It just happens to be something that chimes with the mainstream in so many ways, but she's such an inventive musician, an absolutely genius songwriter, and obviously, as we say, a real virtuoso instrumentalist. She did a mini concert after she got the guitar, and it's just her with a small band on a rooftop, and they play like 5 or 6 songs. It's worth looking up. It's so good. It's her at her most raw, because obviously she wants to highlight the guitar. Yeah, so there's a lot of the guitar is very prominent. It's quite riff heavy, and she goes off on a lot of very noodly solos. It's amazing. Yeah, I highly recommend looking it up.
Fender make a great selection of basses as well. So where's the Little Sims signature bass that I want to see?
Absolutely.
Or the Esperanza Spalding.
Yes, Esperanza Spalding. There's no justice until she gets one, because she's quite feasibly the greatest bass player on this planet.
Yep, she's an 18-string signature bass guitar.
She plays all forms of bass as though they are extensions of her body. So, but this is not fSobriety or whatever that would be. So
we'll get into that once we think of a pun title.
Right, exactly. We are struggling to think of the only reason we have not done jazz mini podcasts because we've not come up with a suitable title yet. That's the truth be told.
No, that's getting a bit
another Bill Cosby-esque phrase with all the things we want to avoid. Before we quit this edition of fSobriety, since we did our last episode, and I have to mention this because obviously I did not speak about Jessie Reyez nearly enough in our previous episode. I'll try and keep this short, because if there's one thing our previous episode taught us, it's that when those floodgates are opened, I cannot be stopped. There's no putting the Jessie Reyez genie back in the bottle.
Can I mention to the listening audience that after we had finished recording, you sent me more audio because you forgot to say some stuff?
I can't be stopped. I love her so much. Immediately after we finished that recording of our previous episode, Jessie Reyez dropped a teaser for a new song and video, and I sent it to you instantly and went, it's like she was listening to me talk.
It was so rapid afterwards that I thought you were joking, and it was like, oh no, this has actually just been released.
She then released another song and another video 2 days afterwards, or a few days afterwards. But basically, in a space of less than a week, she had 2 new videos, 2 brand new songs. No One's in the Room is the first one, and Sugar at Night is the second one. And they're both incredible. And the first one is more on the kind of melancholic, confessional side of Jessie about her own insecurities. And the second one, Sugar at Night, is back in her dark mode, discussing an abusive relationship. The video for that one is super disturbing, where she's in this dysfunctional relationship with a guy with no face.
Oh.
It's very sinister. It's pure art. Speaking of Jessie Reyez, I guess I also have to mention this. She responded to me on social media since we last spoke. I was on a certain online group, and I happened to mention that we'd recorded this podcast, and Jessie Reyez replied to my comment just with a thank you and a love heart, a black love heart, the best kind.
Yep.
I think you'll find. So that was me made for the week. The hell show of 2020 could just continue unbridled for all I cared. I was happy. No one should underestimate just how much Jessie Reyez means to me, in case you did not already get that from our previous episode. But just to put a cap on it, she's become so special to me that I've internalised her image and applied it to a fictional character in my fictional universe. And you, James, know that's when someone is special to me.
Oh yeah. Yes, I do. And it is, I think that's my favourite celebrity social media interaction of the last couple of weeks for sure.
Well, except there might be another one, but we'd have to come out of fSobriety to talk about that.
So we'll catch you guys next time
on fSobriety. Toodle pip. Right, guys, seriously, we are going to start talking about Fargo in just a moment, right? But before we do, that segue there, James.
Did we just segue between podcasts? Because
I think we did. This is a monumental moment. It's never been done. This is breaking the fourth wall.
We are pushing the boundaries here. We are groundbreaking. Groundbreaking being a word that we both forgot in a previous episode, as I discovered while editing it, and edited out a lot of silence of us going, "What's that word?"
It's a very professional podcast.
Yeah,
but speaking of celebrity replies to social media posts,
I had my favourite celebrity interaction possibly ever on the internet, even more so than when Juliet Landau, the actress who played Drusilla in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, just started following me on Twitter. I had a response to a tweet from an actress by the name of Lisa George, who is apparently a Coronation Street actress.
It's fantastic.
On a tweet that I did, basically like dogpiling Rishi Sunak.
Give the context for people who are not familiar with Rishi Sunak and the goings on of British politics.
Okay, so for those of you unfamiliar, Rishi Sunak is the Chancellor of the Exchequer in the current Conservative government. Now he's had a bit of a roller coaster in sort of centre left circles, who have at times been like, "Oh, this guy's good." Don't know if you noticed that there was a very sort of James O'Brien audience of people who at times were just like,
peak liberalism.
Yeah, they were like, he's one of the good ones for his responses to COVID and whatnot. But recently he suggested in an interview with ITV News, given that the entertainment industry is struggling, as we talked about earlier in the podcast, we're going to get to Fargo in a minute, but Rishi Sunak mentioned that perhaps people who had jobs in the music industry and the arts in general should retrain, because it's not a viable career path currently or anymore, and just get another job, because apparently people who have had the same job for years in this current climate can just fucking retrain and do other jobs. So in response to that, me being a rare user of social media, but when I tweet, I tweet nasty. I tweeted...
That's the sequel to Drive Angry.
Yeah, tweet nasty. I tweeted ironically...
Just the pandemic era sequel.
Yeah, I tweeted ironically, this Rishi Sunak cunt appears to have retrained into the arts sector in his successful ongoing career as an absolute clown.
Which, first of all, congrats, that is quite a funny tweet.
I thought it was pretty good, man. I was into it. However, Lisa George of Coronation Street, a show I don't watch, replied, "Funny!" exclamation mark. And I was like, who's this Lisa George then? And when realised she had a tick next to her name, so I looked her up, and Coronation Street actor.
I saw that and I laughed aloud for ages. It's just so random that a Coronation Street actor saw your tweet and thought it was funny. But for anyone outside the UK, Coronation Street is a long-running TV soap opera on British television. It's been, since the 50s?
I think so, yeah. It's been going for at least 50 years it's been running, possibly even, it must be like closer to 70.
I guess the 1950s, yeah. So it's been going a long time. Lisa George has not been on it all that time.
No, she's quite a young woman by the looks of her. But I looked at her timeline, and her timeline was just full of Rishi Sunak burns. So presumably she was just searching for mentions. But made my fucking day. I didn't respond to her.
I saw it, I could not stop laughing. I was like, that's just so good. Those are the moments that social media is quite fun. Unfortunately, it does not happen often enough. But I did not know who she was either. When I noticed she'd commented and I saw the blue check, I thought that I went and looked up who she was. But I noticed she's also a contestant on she was a contestant on Dancing on Ice. So that's interesting. You know who else is going to be a contestant on Dancing on Ice?
Who's that?
Lady Alicia.
What?
The next season of Dancing on Ice, Lady Alicia is going to be on it. If you don't know who Lady Alicia is, she's a British grime MC. And one of the funniest people on social media, and a real wordsmith, like a real genius, and she doesn't quite get the props she deserves a lot of the time because she's just seen as a bit of a clown because she is just naturally very funny. But she's a genius lyricist. Also, by all accounts, just a really lovely human being. She does a lot for social causes. And yeah, she's going to be in the next Dancing on Ice. Is when I saw that, it reminded me. But you know what else happened about Lady Alicia this week? We now have to call her Lady Alicia BEM. British Empire Medal. So
wow.
She's now of the order. Which is so weird. But it's because of her work for charity. But yeah, it's just so weird. But she was posting about it on social media, and it's one of those things, like, I'm sure, like yourself, a lot of us have, for people who live outside the UK, you might not appreciate this, but when people receive honours from the Queen, it can sometimes be viewed as being a bit problematic, as some people can view it as being, you're kind of a sellout if you accept one. I think it depends entirely on who it is, though. And I think there's definitely arguments to be made about this, but I don't mind that Lady Alicia accepted an order from the Queen. I think that's fine.
I think it's just for comedy value, like,
hilarious. Yeah, for one thing, for comedy value, it's fantastic, especially considering that Lady Alicia often calls herself a queen, and she has the Queen's Speech series and all that, and she constantly lampoons the imagery of monarchy. It's kind of beautiful. And also, just having a young person of colour who's from a family, an Afro-Caribbean family, and she's very much in touch with her roots, and she does talk about these things, about the struggles her family went through. It maybe serves more of a positive purpose than just an other white celebrity accepting an order of the British Empire. You know what I mean?
Totally makes up for Windrush.
Yes, everything's okay now. It reminds me, it's like last year MIA accepted one. I forget what order, what the honour was that she received.
I'll consult the Hamilton right now.
Knowing how anti-establishment MIA is, I was a bit surprised that she accepted one, but I had not appreciated that her mother used to be employed actually making the materials for those medals. And I feel like MIA has done enough that we're not going to question her anti-establishment position. I guess that's what I was getting at when it depends who it is, because that sends way more of a message, I think, than if MIA had just refused it.
Oh, it's an MBE.
An MBE, there you go. I knew it was one of the big ones.
There you go. MIA MBE.
MIA MBA and Lady Alicia BEM. That's legally how we have to refer to them from now on, or we will be beheaded. So, right, we're going to start chatting about Fargo in just a moment. Before we do, though, because I've mentioned an artist I admire appearing on a reality talent contest, it has reminded me, just the other week, I made an interesting discovery. Now, on our very first episode of this podcast, James, when we were talking about some of our favourite music from the past few years, I made mention of a metal band called Bloodhunter. I don't know if you recall.
That's right, Spanish band.
Yes, Spanish melodic death metal band. And wait a minute, James, is this
an episode of
fSobriety, the podcast in which we discuss all things metal?
I think it might be. Cue the music.
Hello and welcome to fSobriety, the podcast in which, as I've just said, we discuss all things metal.
Now here's the thing, if you're listening to this because we don't have any visuals to accompany it, you might not know, but right now it's transferred to both of us sitting on a couch against the green screen background of like Cosmos going through space, much like Crusher's Cosmos from the TV show Raw Power / Noisy Mother.
At any minute now it's going to segue to the sofa from Beavis and Butthead. So yeah, Bloodhunter are a melodic death metal band from Spain. I've really been digging them for the past few years. Their vocalist, the fabulously named Diva Satanica, is just incredible. Now, recently, for the past couple of months or so maybe, I'd noticed when I was on YouTube that I was getting some strange suggestions. Now, that's not unusual, right? Yeah. Quite often I'm on YouTube and for some fucking reason I get Alex Jones and Jordan Peterson videos recommended to me. I don't know what it is in my previous viewing history that make YouTube think that I wanted to hear anything those wankers ever have to say.
Oh, it's because I keep sending the heads of YouTube bribes to be like, oh, this guy's really into Jordan Peterson, by the way. The only Jordan Peterson video I have ever fully watched on YouTube was a compilation of Jordan Peterson getting owned.
That's the only one worth watching. So it wasn't that unusual. So it's not that unusual. I don't often pay attention to what my suggestions are because I just think, okay, YouTube's tripping. But I started to notice I was getting suggestions for clips from La Voz, which is the Spanish version of The Voice, which, as most of you will know, is a talent show in which members of the public go on and sing, basically, and are judged by people. On their singing.
On the strength of their voice and not how they look.
Right.
Because the judges face away from them when they come in.
Correct.
And they only turn around after they've...
That is a key component, yes. Yeah. So these things kept popping up in my YouTube homepage, and I was like, I don't know what... But I wasn't paying attention to what it was, right? But then just the other week, I just glanced at one of the thumbnails, and I was like, that looks a bit like Diva Satanica. I was like, what? I clicked on it, and lo and behold, Diva Satanica in 2017 did actually appear as a contestant on the Spanish version of The Voice. And James, I've actually sent you the link to her singing Sweet Dreams.
Incredible.
And it is pretty fantastic. And the reactions from the judges, because she starts off singing clean for the first couple of bars, and then she goes into full death metal growling and shrieking. And the reactions on the judges' faces are just spectacular. But she apparently lasted long enough to appear at least 3 times, because I found 3 clips of her singing different songs.
Holy shit.
Well, what is going on? It's just absolutely fantastic. So that brought me a small bit of delight learning that. I will put the link in the episode description, because please do check it out, guys. It's just a joy to behold. And obviously check out Bloodhunter if you like your metal, which obviously you do. Otherwise, why would you be listening to fSobriety?
Exactly.
Unless the podcast host had somehow performed a bait and switch. Whilst we're in fSobriety, in fact, while I'm still talking about Bloodhunter, Diva Satanica is also now the vocalist of a Brazilian band called Nervosa. Have you ever heard of Nervosa?
I have not heard of Nervosa.
Okay, well, I definitely included quite a bit of stuff in the metal birthday playlist I made for you, which I know is 5 years long, so I do not blame you for not having heard it.
I may well have heard them then, but not looked at who it was.
One thing you should know about me, listeners, is when I make a playlist, I'm incapable of keeping it concise. A lot like the way we approach this podcast, some might say.
We'll get to Fargo in a minute.
Yeah, definitely get to Fargo in just a minute. Nervosa are an amazing all-female thrash metal band from Sao Paulo, and their former frontwoman, the vocalist and bassist, the woman named Fernanda Lira, I absolutely love her. She's incredible, great vocalist, amazing bass player, an amazing on-stage presence. She's really cool on social media. She's, as you might expect, highly critical of Bolsonaro and is frequently fighting with fascists in comments. And she's just fantastic. So I was a wee bit heartbroken earlier this year when it was announced she was leaving Nervosa. But then literally just a couple of months later, it was announced that Diva Satanica was now the vocalist for Nervosa, and I was like, what? But then my next thought was, does that mean Bloodhunter are disbanding? But apparently not. Diva Satanica is now doing both bands. And I'm like, I got 2 Diva Satanica bands, this is great. And meanwhile, Fernanda Lira has formed a whole new death metal band called Crypta, who have only released a couple of demos so far, but solid. And I'm like, I couldn't be happier. I'm like a pig in metal shit.
A metal pig in metal shit. Outstanding. I will check out those bands for sure.
Before we quit this edition of fSobriety, just let me mention quickly, Napalm Death dropped a new album this year.
Yes, I heard that.
It's fucking great.
It's incredible.
I mean, it's, hey, if it ain't broke, but you know what I mean? It's fantastic. It's Napalm Death being classic Napalm Death. I also want to make mention of a Welsh band called Venom Prison. They just released their most recent album called Primeval, which I think you would really dig it, James. It's like old school death metal mixed with a touch of Rollo Tomasi.
Oh, nice. Let's get that sort of the weirdo nature of it.
I think you would dig them.
Shout out to Rollo Tomasi.
Also the new Anal Nathrak, who are kind of industrial black / death metal band.
Anal Nathrak.
ANNAL
right.
space NATHRAKH.
So that's the year of whatever Athrak happens to.
Yeah, I don't know why I've never looked this up. That seems like something a professional podcast host would do.
Let's consult the Hamiltron. Oh no, I misspelled it. I'm getting all sorts of results.
Yeah, Anal Narthalap. You don't want that. I had a bad case of that once. But their new album is killer. I highly recommend. Check it out. So the new Anal Nathrak album is called Endarkenment, which, guys, I'm not sure that's a word, but whatever. But it does have some pretty fantastic song titles.
It's a perfectly cromulent album name.
It's a perfectly cromulent album that embiggens each song title, such as Libidinous, parentheses, a pig with cocks in its eyes, close parentheses. And also one which I think is pretty relevant in today's political climate: create art though the world may perish.
Nice, although a pig with cocks in its eyes is indicative of the political culture of a few years ago in the UK.
This is true.
There's a David Cameron pig fucker throwback joke. Remember when that was shocking?
I know. I yearn for those halcyon days where we could joke about the Prime Minister fucking a dead pig. And if there's nothing else to take away from this podcast, it should be that. And that wraps it up for today's edition of fSobriety. Toodle pip. Killer ep of fSobriety there. Killer.
Yep, that podcast is going to go far.
Right, that's enough of the segues, James. Stop messing around.
This is like the podcast equivalent of Louis Buñuel's The Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie.
Oh, yes, that's a contemporary mainstream reference that the kids will appreciate. Speaking of things the kids will appreciate, one other thing I just wanted to mention: we are going to get started on Fargo. How many times have I said that now?
I think only like once or twice. It's fine. We'll get started in a minute.
Jesus, we're going to start on Fargo to the tune of Billy Joel.
There's the podcast title.
Yeah, Megan Thee Stallion on SNL. Did you see it?
I did not see Megan Thee Stallion on SNL.
It was pretty great. It was pretty righteous. And she said and did a lot of very righteous things that were very relevant to the moment. I'm not going to get into detail about it because most people have probably heard about it already. And if you haven't, just go look it up on YouTube. I will, however, quote what I think is the best bit of commentary about it, which is actually an article from Reductress. And if you're not familiar with Reductress, it's a feminist satirical site. In an unanticipated turn of events, Megan Thee Stallion has been declared the front-runner in the 2020 US presidential election. The news came after voters overwhelmingly praised Megan's SNL performance this weekend, in which she made more powerful, eloquent statements about the country in a few minutes than Joe Biden or Donald Trump could make in a fucking hour and a half.
I'm woefully under-familiar with Megan Thee Stallion's musical output. Aside from WAP, obviously, and her NPR Tiny Desk concert that she did a while back, I don't think I've actually heard any of her stuff, but I really, really dug her Tiny Desk concert.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's definitely got the strength to diversify her sound a bit more than she has done. I mean, I think I can feel that a great deal from everything she's done so far. I think she's potentially got longevity as an artist, and I think there's... part of what she's talking about in both these things, I say both these things because I'm about to also just mention the op-ed she wrote for the New York Times, is the way in which female artists are often kind of just dismissed and treated as, throwaway trash, purely because A, they are black women, and B, they're black women making a specific subgenre within hip-hop that, for whatever reason, is treated as kind of trash anyway, but even more so when it's women doing it. And the criticisms of it get increasingly misogynistic. And you know this, James, because you, like me, will have seen this happen, seen this unfold on social media. In fact, every single article that I've seen posted on social media about Megan's SNL performance, I don't need to go into detail. You can already guess the level of misogynistic content that is posted in the comments.
If I felt like being a horrible prick, I could probably write all those comments out on a page myself and read them without having seen any of the comments, because I know what to expect.
Without flexing any level of creativity, because it's just the most obvious, basically just create in your head the most obvious stereotype of an awful man, and just say all the things he would say, and you know instantly what it is. That content, it's reworded slightly comment by comment, but the content essentially is always the same, and it's always the same vile misogynistic shit. I actually think Megan's a really interesting artist, but I think what she's done in the last couple of weeks, particularly what she's been through with the whole, let's just be blunt about it, Tory Lanez shot her. So, she talks about that in this NY Times op-ed, which is really good. It's really worth a read. I'm just going to quote a little bit of it here. In the weeks leading up to the election, black women are expected once again to deliver victory for Democratic candidates. We've gone from being unable to vote legally to a highly courted voting bloc, all in little more than a century. Despite this, and despite the way so many have embraced messages about racial justice this year, black women are still constantly disrespected and disregarded in so many areas of life. My initial silence about what happened was out of fear for myself and for my friends. Even as a victim, I've been met with skepticism and judgment. The way people have publicly questioned and debated whether I played a role in my own violent assault proves that my fears about discussing what happened were unfortunately warranted. It's pretty powerful stuff. It's a really great read, and I recommend everyone check it out. Speaking of op-eds, and this isn't really an op-ed, but it has just made me remember Misha Green, creator of Lovecraft Country.
Yes.
She said something this week that caught my eye, and I think you already know what I'm going to say.
Yep.
It was in response to criticism of her handling of the Yahima character in episode 4, which you and I had a lot to say about on a previous episode. And so basically all of the criticisms we had, people on social media had been putting those things to Misha Green. And she did respond. She said, and I quote, "I wanted to show the uncomfortable truth that oppressed folks can also be oppressors. But I didn't examine or unpack the moment or the portrayal of Yahima as thoroughly as I should have. It's a story point that I still think is worth making, but I failed in the way I chose to make it." I'm glad she said this. I'm glad that she recognises it was a shortcoming, and I think I always credited her with that was what she was trying to do, and I definitely think she's right. It is a theme that's worth pursuing, and I think she does that. She does pursue it a bit more in her interrogation of the character of Montrose in the later episodes. So it's clearly something that she is consciously pursuing. I'm glad that she's recognised that she fucked up slightly with the portrayal of that character. Some people might. I'm certainly not going to lock Misha Green into the stocks and pillory her. I don't think that's what's called for here. I think she's recognised that she messed up. But all I'm saying is from my own white dude's perspective, I'm entirely happy for Misha Green to be given more opportunities to try this kind of thing again. It seems to be seems like she's learned from the experience. Everything in Lovecraft Country, all the positive things I've said about it, she clearly is a talented creator. Lovecraft Country for me is a bit muddled, but that doesn't mean that she's not capable of producing great stuff, because there are definite moments of greatness on that show.
Speaking of which, there have been a few more episodes since the last time we recorded a podcast.
There have been, and you know what? In our when we covered the first 4 episodes, I think we said if there was an uptick in our enjoyment of the show, we'd probably talk about it a bit more.
I believe, we mentioned that we would, or that I said I really hope that I get proven wrong and the show turns around and is good. And wouldn't you believe it? That I've really enjoyed the most recent 4 or 5 episodes.
You know what, James? Guys, we're gonna start talking about Fargo.
We'll get to Fargo in a minute.
In just a bit, right? But first, I think we owe it to Misha Green and to Lovecraft Country to kind of talk about the episodes we have not spoken about on this podcast yet.
Yeah. I would like to issue a public apology to Misha Green for rampantly shitting all over the show.
You were definitely harsher on it than I was.
Yeah. In all seriousness, the most recent episode I thought was good, but that was episode 9 for listeners. I thought it was good, but like it wasn't amazing. It wasn't amazing to me. But
at the time of recording, we should just make clear, at the time of recording, there is only one episode left to air of the show.
But the previous 3 episodes to that were just a 1, 2, 3 punch of like great TV.
I generally agree. It's still patchy, but not to the extent that it was in those episodes we had real problems with. The worst episodes for me were episodes 2 and 3, and then the ending of episode 4. Those for me are the worst points in this season. It's generally been better since. There are still moments where I'm like, yeah, but generally speaking, yeah, no, there's a definite uptick in my enjoyment for sure. I think our last episode of doing the podcast, we kind of glossed over episodes 5 and 6. Is that right?
Yeah, we talked about the episode with they Gotta Go Faster.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Which for me was the start of
Gia and her
the
nine
excellent
tails.
3 episodes. So
Right, and that episode was a really interesting episode of television, and I said at the time it pushed a lot of my buttons, because it was doing that whole retelling of history with this kind of metaphysical thing in the background, which, as you know, James, is one of the 5 people on Earth. I'm exaggerating, or what's the opposite of exaggerating?
Unsaturating.
I'm unsaturating. More people than that have read it, but I just like to say that. But you're one of the people who've read stuff I've written, James.
Are you talking about your 3-part novel Redshift over Badtown, available where all good books are sold?
Hashtag plug. And also Codex Widdershins, which is a work in progress.
Available where all good books will be sold in future.
Yeah. So stories that retell horrific moments in history that have a kind of metaphysical bent in the background is very much my bag. So I really dug that episode a lot.
Fingers crossed that hopefully one day soon Carly Chaikin will also understand that about your writing.
You better explain that for the listeners.
Carly Chaikin tweeted...
Carly the Queen Chaikin.
Yep, Carly the Queen Chaikin, isn't she lovely? Tweeted asking for book recommendations, so I jumped right in and recommended Craig's book.
And can I just thank you for your service?
You're very welcome, sir.
Alright, so man, episode 7 was a trip. Episode 7 was Hippolyta's Afrofuturist adventures through time and space.
It was incredible. I could not believe what I was watching.
It was an incredible hour of television. Do you know what? It's a perfect example again of something I did not expect or necessarily want from this show, but it left me feeling so glad I got it.
Yeah.
It was a real, just balls to the wall Afrofuturist science fiction feminist narrative that incorporated so many elements of black culture and black history, and it made Hippolyta essentially a kind of interstellar goddess. It was incredible. Every single part of that episode was just a delight. The early parts of it, I was like, where is this going? What the hell is happening here? Like, I was still too entrenched at that point in the 1 potato, 2 potato of where the plot was going, because I guess with my frustrations with the previous episodes, that's where I was still hedging my bets of where I was going to get some value.
Yeah.
That turned out not to be where I got value. I got value out of the freewheeling kind of Fritz Lang channeled through the consciousness of Sun Ra hyper real sci-fi epic that we got treated to. It was just incredible.
Yeah. Or as I thought at the time, Janelle Monáe's Lovecraft Country.
Right, yeah, there was definitely shades of Janelle in there as well.
Do you think that Ingenue Ellis was, when she got the part, when she read for it, do you think she knew in advance that she was going to have a wild fucking episode based around her character? Or do you think she went into that role thinking, I guess I'll be like a sort of supporting mother character, and then they're like, oh, by the way, you're also an intergalactic goddess?
I like to think the latter. I'd like to think it came to her just a massive surprise.
That'd be amazing. It'd be such a... Imagine getting that script and being like, oh, I'm in this one, and holy shit.
You know, despite, or maybe even because of all the really far-flung, hyper-real fantasy elements that were going on in that episode, there were some real important character notes, and it was all about Hippolyta. I mean, and Hippolyta became way more real in that episode than she had been previously, and she was always solid. The writing of that character was always reasonably good. Ingenue Ellis's performance has been top quality right from the first episode, but that episode really made Hippolyta real in a way that she hadn't been previously, and my hat was off to some of the writing in there. I'm thinking specifically of things like the way in which a lot of this show has been about challenging white supremacy, and this episode did that as well, but it also challenged patriarchy away from white supremacy, and it also challenged, and this was one of the things I really picked up on that I was really glad they did, this challenge to respectability, because black women historically have always had to be kind of respectable in order to be respected. They've always had to be very kind of reserved, and they're never allowed to raise their voice, and they're never allowed to be angry, they're never allowed to be upset, they're never allowed to even be passionate without incurring some criticism. In fact, this sort of relates to what I was saying about Megan Thee Stallion in a way. They're never allowed to be fully human, they're only allowed to be kind of ciphers of the black female experience, and that's really the only way that in our culture generally that they're accepted. And what I loved about this episode was that Hippolyta embodied everything it means to be a black woman, pretty much, and I thought that was incredible writing. One of my favourite lines in that episode, when she goes to join Josephine Baker in Paris, and Josephine Baker is, you know, asking her what she really wants, and she has that line where she says, all of this being respectable, it was really just a result of her own fear, and really all she had done by doing that was make herself a continued victim of white supremacy in a way. And she has that line where she says, they managed to lynch me without me even noticing the noose. And I don't know about you, but I gasped at that line. I was like,
that was some
man,
powerful
that
line.
Is a great line.
Yeah.
And this is in an episode where we've just seen her travel through an interdimensional portal and then be accosted by, first we're not sure whether this entity that's like Janelle Monáe's, what's the name of Janelle Monáe's cyborg character?
Cindy Mayweather, there we go. We'd watched Hippolyta go through all this mad shit, and somehow it still came down to this fundamentally human level, and it really delivered all the notes that it needed to deliver. On that note, by the way, before I move on, figure in question, did you see what she was credited as in the credits? No, I didn't.
The character is credited as Beyond Say. So it's two words, Beyond, and Say as in C''EST, the French for that is. So beyond what is.
That's amazing.
That, I think, is a spectacular pun. And I like that they went out of their way to make that pun. Yeah, I thought that was great.
Do you know my favourite thing about that episode? All in was right at the end when you see Tick come out of the portal and you're like, oh, Tick had an adventure as well, but fuck that guy, because no one wants to see it.
Yeah, I'm still on the hashtag fuck Tick train.
Yeah, because I was like, well, I wasn't really, but Sarah was like, fuck, does this mean that our next episode's just going to be Tick's adventure? Turns out it wasn't. Didn't need to see that shit.
It was not. No.
We just wanted to see Hippolyta's interdimensional goddess adventures, and I am here for that. I would watch a whole season of that shit. For sure.
Also, there was the whole thing with alternate George, Mr. Angela Bassett back in the house. Glad to see him back. That conversation they have, man, that really affected me. I found that really emotionally affecting, where Hippolyta is basically saying to him, but you also were part of my prison. You know, you also encouraged me to become small. And it's this idea that by the culture that we live in, kind of forcing black women into these small shapes that they don't really belong into and that kind of suffocate them and that they can't really flourish in, but it's the way they survive, you know? And that on some level, the men in their life are complicit in that process. And I liked that they did it with George, because we know George is a good guy. So it really made that point all the more powerful. Like, if George had been an uncaring husband, there's no way that would have been as powerful, because it'd just be like, well, obviously that's the case for him because he's a shitbag, that guy. But when it's George, you're like, oh man. And the fact that George really takes it on board, there were some beautiful moments there. I've got to say as well, you see them doing the terraforming together in these far-flung alien locations.
In the weird sort of like not quite steampunk, but like wacky spacesuits that they're wearing.
Yeah,
it was like
that really brought a tear to my eye, and it was just you again. And I know I've mentioned this before. You're just so not used to seeing black people in those traditional roles, and we've seen that kind of imagery again and again and again to the point that it's become anodyne. But you put black people in there that are also well-written characters and who have just had this major kind of epiphany in their relationship. that imagery really packed a punch. I was like, this really does feel like all the things that sci-fi was supposed to embody, which was all about, utopian futures before, we got to the 60s, 70s, where it became all about dystopia. But all of that stuff felt very hopeful and very pure. That episode generally just left me feeling really upbeat, and I was like, this is the last thing I expected for the show. But that was one of the most feel-good episodes of TV. Yeah, I'm glad Dee got an episode. It wasn't quite... She didn't get a whole episode in the way that Hippolyta did, but it was focused on her enough that we got to know her character a bit more. I think Dee's a really cool character. We've been saying this all the time about the cast on this show, and I know I'm sounding like a broken record every time we talk about this show, but this cast is so fucking good. The young actress that plays Dee is amazing. We cannot talk about this, of course, without mentioning the fact that they start this episode with the funeral of Emmett Till, so they finally paid off on the Emmett Till thing, which was one of the things I was worried about previously, that maybe that was just going to be a signpost that would not be fleshed out. So they committed to that, and they committed to the idea that Emmett Till was actually one of Dee's closest friends. And so Dee is absolutely, distressed and in a state of abject grief at this point. And I thought the way that was played was really pretty brilliant, and I thought that young actress was amazing. I have some mixed feelings about the curse that is put on her by Captain Lancaster, but the way it played out.
You mean the Marilyn Manson video?
It was a wee bit Marilyn Manson video. Here's the thing, though, and I will say this is what that scene brought home to me after I thought about it a while, and it compounds something that I'd kind of been talking about quite a bit in our previous coverage of this show. There are elements of this show that are not for me, and the reason I'm not responding to them the way that maybe I would like to is because it's not for me. And what I mean by that is, see the horror of those two ghouls, that's created in such a way that, see, if you're not a black person, it's not going to be as frightening. First of all, the imagery is based directly on the character of Topsy from Uncle Tom's Cabin. Mm-hmm. And that character, originally when that book was written, as I'm sure most people know, it was written as an abolitionist text. It was written in favour of abolishing slavery, and it was trying to, on some level, to show all the different examples of humanity among black people. That sounds like a crazy thing to even say these days, right? But black people's humanity was something that was debated back then. So one of the things that book was trying to do was have as many different kinds of black characters as possible. One of the characters in it, Topsy, is a slave girl, and she's essentially what was called a pickaninny, which I hate even saying that word because it is essentially a slur, but it's a specific term that came out of that time to describe an uneducated black child. And basically Topsy, culture-wise, that the imagery of that character became a bit of a stereotype that was ultimately used against black people. And Topsy is essentially so dehumanized by her experience as a slave that she barely even recognizes herself as human. That's kind of the point of her character in the story. So for someone like Dee, who's a very educated, very intelligent young black girl, the imagery of that character is terrifying, because that's how white supremacy views someone like Dee, no matter what she does, no matter what her achievements are. And I think that imagery alone is powerful enough. If you're a black person and you come from a culture where people view that imagery as being part and parcel of who you are as a culture, as a people, that is on a base level horrifying, that in a way that it's not for us, because even though we can culturally recognize it as horrifying, it's not the same as lived experience. It can never be the same as lived experience.
True.
So I do think, as much as I have misgivings about the way it was staged, I thought the choreography of the way the girls moved was amazing. I thought it was really cool.
Oh,
I didn't necessarily find it scary.
By the way, let me just like slide in your DMs here.
Sure.
And say, when I say the Marilyn Manson video thing aspect of it, I'm not saying it was bad. I'm just saying like that style of movement and stuff is very indicative of. Do you know what's not even Marilyn Manson? I got my videos wrong. It reminded me of Push It by Garbage.
Okay.
The video for Push It, there's like dancers in it that do it.
I should have known it'd be a 90s reference, James.
Fucking me and my 90s shit again. James is back on his 90s horse. Yeehaw! But no, it's that style of thing, which, to be honest, I don't find scary, but I've always found kind of cool to look at. So.
Right, same. And I found this cool to look at. But you know what? I think maybe the show is playing a double bind here. Maybe somebody like you and I, we're supposed to think it's cool to look at, and then reflect on it and go, oh no, maybe I should feel dirty for thinking that was cool.
Yeah.
Because of all the connotations, in which case I'd have to say job done.
Yep. Stunned a billion.
So the horror, so the way the horror would work, you know, for a black audience is not the same way it works on us. For us, I guess it creeps up on us because our dumb white asses have to sit and fucking, you know, take it apart piece by piece. And then go, I mean, as much as I understood what the cultural references were, there still was that level. I was like, I'm not finding this scary until I actually sat down and thought about it. Went, no, actually, of course it's fucking horrifying. What, you know what I mean? It just wasn't made for me to be horrifying in the way that it's made to be horrifying for a black audience. It does make me think maybe there are lots of other things in the earlier episodes that haven't given a fair enough due in that respect, and maybe have to go back and revisit.
You know, the way we were talking about how things are frightening for those who've lived the experience and maybe not for us. I watched a video by, I think I mentioned this YouTuber before, but I think I'd forgotten his name because I'd had a few drinks. The channel's called Quinn's Ideas. I think I mentioned, I said he's like this sort of black nerd YouTuber who's a massive H.P. Lovecraft fan. And remember we were talking about how, you can't separate the art from the artist, where he's concerned, and I was saying this kid was basically like saying, I say kid, I think he's in his 20s, but you know, we're old bastards, so whatever.
It's a kid to me.
But he was making the case for the separation of the art from the artist, where H.P. Lovecraft is concerned. Anyway, he did a video. He's still not watched Lovecraft Country, but he read the book because he didn't want to watch the show until he read the book. And it was a really interesting video watching him talk about the book and the portrayal of like what it's like to be a black nerd in the 50s with all this stuff going on. And he's like, it shook me because he's like, it made me rethink my experiences. He told a story about being at like a comic shop when he started college with a couple of his friends, and he went out to get something to eat, and his friends were inside the comic shop, and a guy was staring at him. Then the guy kind of walked up to him, and then his white friends, I should say, came out the comic shop, and he came up to start talking to his white friends, and the guy was like, "Or is he with you?" And they were like, "Yeah," and he's like, "Sorry, I thought you were just," he's like, "Guess I'm not going to have to use this." And it opens his jacket, and he's got a gun, and he was like,
Jesus.
He's like, "This kind of shit happens to me all the time." Or it happened to me. It doesn't say all the time. It says it happened to him quite a lot. And he says these are the kind of experiences that are so commonplace that he feels like it's not worth mentioning most of the time. And he says, but, you know, reading the book, it's like it's seeing other people recognise it. This is it. Basically, it really affected them. So I'll be interested to see Quinn's Ideas review of Lovecraft Country, the show, when he watches it. But he's also worth checking out. Also, he knows a lot about Dune. Like, a lot. Like, he has like literally hundreds of hours of videos explaining Dune. So if you ever want to really get into Dune, I'd go check out Quinn's Ideas.
Okay.
Anyway,
that is interesting.
This isn't fSobriety.
No, not yet. No, I mean, one thing, for a start, how much have we talked about this show on this podcast? There is so much to say about this show. I mean, this is an incredibly rich show, and that's one of the things I've been trying to get at, even in my criticisms of it, is that, you know, there's so much going on in this show. There's so much textually that's really interesting, and when it pays off, it can be really powerful. So yeah, that episode, there was all that stuff going on with Dee. I enjoyed most of that stuff because I really enjoyed the young actress's performance. I thought she was really great, and on the level of recognising what the imagery was about, I did enjoy it on that level while watching it, even if I didn't find it scary. The horror, as I say, crept up on me afterwards. There is some really complicated kind of politics at work in this episode. Ruby's sex scene with Criswell on the day of Emmett Till's funeral, that felt a bold move to me. Really bold, because Ruby is one of the, I mean, none of the main characters are dumb, but Ruby, you know, I think she's proved herself an intelligent character. She's a strong character, albeit flawed. This seems like a really bold choice that she goes and fucks Criswell Tina on the day of Emmett Till's funeral. And the way that was shot and stuff, with the, you know, the chunks of flesh falling off her as she climaxes to become herself again, it was powerful to watch. It's really complex, though, in terms of how we're supposed to read it as to what exactly is going on there. Ruby does vocalise later that she did not want to be in that moment a black woman having sex with a white man, and so that makes sense. I get that. It still just it feels very confused to me, and I guess it's supposed to be. I mean, it would be a pretty dull show if everybody just did predictable shit.
But also, it was a good HBO moment, I thought.
It was another HB bra moment. There's more entanglements with Ruby in the subsequent episodes, but I guess I'll get to in a second. This was also the episode that gave us Christina's lynching scene, quasi-lynching. And it seems to have been in response to Ruby challenging her into feeling something about it. I guess that's the way we're meant to read it, but I'm not entirely sure that works, because it's not like Christina is not in control of this entire thing. Mm-hmm. So she knows she's going to survive.
I thought it was unnecessary given her previous statement where she said, like, I don't care.
Yeah,
just for what it's worth. And I was like, I thought that was a great character moment, because you're like, yeah, she obviously doesn't. But then to have her be like, but I'll give it a shot and see what it's like. I was like,
I guess what they're trying to flirt with is the idea that maybe Christina's unsure whether she cares or not. And that's the only thing I can think of here. I admit, after this episode aired, I joked with you and said, "Oh, this is a classic white liberal feminist moment by just essentially recycling black trauma and making it all about themselves." But I do actually think that's kind of what Misha Green was going for. In which case, on that level, I think the scene works. It still doesn't explain the impetus for Christina having chosen to do it, though.
Just
because
for a laugh.
What happened to Emmett Till wasn't just the violence, it was also the terror in knowing he would not survive, and it was also the horror of this being the end point of all of the discrimination that he will have lived with in his entire young life up until that point, things which Christina in her position could never even conceive of. So there's no way that the two things are even remotely comparable. So don't know, it's a bit of a weird one.
Maybe it was like, this might be kind of low barring it a bit, but if I'm going to make a Groundhog Day comparison, in Groundhog Day when Bill Murray realizes he can't die and he just keeps waking up, so he starts just inventively killing himself, because he knows it's not going to matter. Maybe there was a part of that in it where she's like, oh, this seems like a new experience to try now that I've heard about it. Could be.
Maybe, but
that to me would make sense with the character, because she is uncaring as fuck.
But she seems very, very attached to her invulnerability, though. Yeah. I mean, that's... I don't know.
What's the point of a sports car if you're not going to drive it around? Show it off, you know what I mean?
I guess. Yeah, actually, since we're talking about Christina, I did actually want to make mention of the fact, on all our previous talk about this and how much we've praised the cast, I don't think we've talked about Abby Lee's performance as Christina.
Hey, Abby Lee is fucking great. Abby Lee
she's
is
really good.
So good. Like,
she's great in this role.
I don't think it was till episode 2 or 3 when I realised that we had seen her before, from Mad Max Fury Road, and I was like,
Mad Max Fury Road, I just want to see her first saw her.
Yeah, I just want to see her being like, Schlinger.
She was also in The Neon Demon, a Nicholas Winding Refn movie with Elle Fanning. And have you seen that?
I've not seen The Neon Demon, no.
I have a history with that movie because I went to the cinema to see that film, and I had such a visceral reaction of pure hatred to that movie the first time I saw it.
I thought you didn't like it that much.
Right, but then like a year later, I don't know why, right? But in the year since I saw it, I couldn't stop thinking about it. It's one of those movies that gets into your fucking subconscious and just doesn't go away. And I was like, I'm going to have to watch that again, even if it's just, as Bill Hicks would say, fill my hump of hate. So I went and revisited it, and you know what? I actually kind of enjoyed it the second time.
Man, you had a simply irresistible moment.
It was so weird. Like I watched it the second time, I was like, this almost feels like a different movie.
It's Nicholas, what's his name?
Nicholas Winding Refn.
That's it. He directed Drive, didn't he?
Director of Drive and what's it called? Valhalla Rising.
The reason that I didn't watch The Neon Demon was because I thought Drive was one of the fucking dullest films I ever had to sit through.
Interesting. I actually quite liked Drive.
I was like, where's the drive-in? I went into expecting a different movie, frankly.
Right, okay, yeah, that's fair. I completely see why people don't like that movie. I actually liked it. I love the atmosphere. I think it looks beautiful. It's one of the best, most cinematic representations of contemporary Los Angeles. I really like the non-characterization in it. It feels very Michael Antonioni to me, and
hey,
I
girl.
do feel like, indeed. Nicholas Winding Refn is one of those directors who does such a great job of impersonating other directors, and that was his Antonioni movie. The Neon Demon is a bit like his David Lynch movie, but it's David Lynch without any of the humour, and I think that's one of the reasons I had such a visceral negative reaction to it. But anyway, this is a long-winded way to get me around to why I'm talking about this.
Yep.
Abby Lee is also in that movie, and she plays literally the same character as she's playing on Lovecraft Country. But she is terrifying in The Neon Demon. And bless her, she is one of those people that just has that reptilian sort of quality about her.
She's got that Stephanie Corneliuson face, right?
Yeah, totally. She's got that supermodel razor-sharp cheekbones and the pale blue eyes and the pale skin, and you just think, you're not human, you're more of a reptile. Yeah, she gives a really chilling performance in The Neon Demon, and she's doing it again here in Lovecraft Country. I think she's actually breathtakingly good.
Yep.
And it snuck up on me just how good she is in this show. But I guess it's because it's not until we see more of the relationship between her and Ruby that she becomes more of a character and less of a phantom,
Yep.
which is essentially what she is before that point. Episode 8 also gave us Letty with the invulnerability spell, and I really enjoyed this. I remember messaging you going, Letty Cage. Letty Cage, heroin for hire.
Yep.
The bullets bouncing off her in that shootout scene, I was like, yes.
I did.
That's something that actually I wanted to note. Earlier in that same episode, she is wearing, did you clock it, a yellow shirt with blue jeans. It's the Luke Cage outfit, man, and I know I already said that about Montrose and Tick in, I think, episode 2. So I get the costume designer is fucking with us here.
Amazing. This episode also brought us Tick dropping an F-bomb, making us hate him even more.
Oh, that's right,
Yeah.
that's right. That episode as well, and I know, I keep going on about how great this cast is. So many great cast moments, performance moments in that episode, because we had the episode where that happens. The scene where that happens. It's shortly after that we also get the scene where Tick and Letty are arguing after Gia turns up. And now I had mixed feelings about this scene because I don't think it added very much. I felt it was in there just to add some human drama for the sake of adding human drama. But if there's one thing this series could do more of, it's probably more of that. So I wasn't complaining. But I came away from that scene going, fuck me, these actors are good. Jesus Christ. And Johnny Smollett and I keep forgetting Tick's real name, Jonathan Majors. They have such great on-screen chemistry together, and even in those charged scenes, it's like when they're arguing, it felt so natural. Like the way they're talking over each other and letting the lines bleed over each other's lines. It's peak acting. I love watching great actors do work, and all those scenes were great. Speaking of Gia, though, I was a wee bit annoyed that she just turned up.
Yeah.
For that one scene, and she's not been
off.
mentioned again. I was like, that seems a bit cheap to me.
That made me sad because she's amazing.
Yeah,
She's got to go faster.
Is she kind of wasted now? It would be a bit sad if so. A note I made about this episode, actually, we've complained a lot about how this show tells you things and does not show them. It literally did that with Tick going to the future, because we did not see Tick go to the future. He literally just says, oh, by the way, I went to the future and a woman with a robot arm gave me this book written by my son. It's like, okay, guys, you really just could not be bothered at this point, because it's like, should we film that? Ah, fuck it, just get a Tick to tell us. No.
Someone forgot to put film in the camera that day and they were like, ah, fuck.
Given what happens to Dee when the ghouls infect her arm, is Dee potentially the woman in the future with the robot arm?
Well, since everything you've guessed about this show so far has become true, let's just go
we're
out.
We're going to get to
say
that
yes.
in a second. Yeah, that's what I'm landing on that for the moment. We'll see how it goes. But I did think it was just so fucking absurd. Clearly, I mean, that would be a great cinematic scene to see, but he just did not bother showing us it. So the details that Tick gives Montrose when he's telling him about the book Lovecraft Country by George Freeman, who is Tick's son in this reality, about the differences between what really happened These differences apparently are differences that exist in Matt Ruff's novel. So these are the deviations that Misha Green and her writing team have made. So these are all nods.
Do you think that's also a nod to like this is the alternative universe version?
Maybe.
Once again, can't be said enough. Michael K. Williams, that man delivers.
Oh man, yeah, and I'm about to do some real Michael K. Williams filleting just in a moment when we get on episode 9. But before we move on to that, we do have to talk about that spectacle at the end of episode 8, which I think we both agreed is that made up for so many flaws in the show. Because this scene where Captain Lancaster and co siege Lecky's house, lay siege to Lecky's house, and Tick tries to run in, and he's about to get shot. And I'm thinking, is Letty Cage going to have to run out here and deflect bullets? But I'm like, there's no way she's going to get there in time. And lo and behold, we get a black Shoggoth that appears and just fucks shit up.
That's what you want to see.
That was quality. That was so good. That was as far as the action scenes in this show go, that was definitely one of the best ones. Watching all those white supremacist cops get mashed was one of the most satisfying moments in this show so far.
That episode was directed by Misha Green, right?
I was going to bring that up, yeah. It's the only episode she directs, and it's interesting she chose to direct that one. This was obviously a cathartic moment for her.
It was so well done. It was a really well-directed action scene. We love to see the KKK cops getting torn apart by interdimensional monsters. It's great TV.
I was getting some real Soledad vibes there because hashtag plug. Soledad, that's one of my fictional characters from Redshift over Bad Town. And also Kodak's Witterson's forthcoming at some point, possibly never.
Netflix, if you're listening, give them a call. There's your next.
But
there's your next
that cathartic sense of when Soledad appears and just fucks shit up. And just delivers justice in the most vicious form. I was getting that vibe from that scene. I was like, I'm 100% here for this.
Yep.
But yeah, speaking of Misha Green's directorial abilities, she did a solid job in that whole episode. Because there was some very difficult stuff. If you look at her IMDb, she has directed nothing else ever.
That was her directorial debut, was it?
It was indeed, yeah. Pretty impressive, I would say.
Pretty damn impressive.
For sure, yeah. If nothing else, I'd love to see her direct more. Yeah, absolutely. So to wrap this up, episode 9, which is the most recent episode to air just a few days ago, our penultimate episode. It was another roller coaster. It was uneven in places, I have to say. As I intimated earlier, I'm still a bit uneasy in this alliance with Christina, mainly around where Ruby's concerned. I don't really understand why Ruby is so invested in Christina and does not quite seem to be able to see her as the villain in the same way the other characters do. I'm like, Ruby was set up as a very aware character in the early episodes, and I'm at a point now where I'm like, Ruby, come on. Fucking get a grip. But yeah, we'll see how that pans out.
Maybe Ruby needs to be close to that thing for like the finale, you know. It might be she might have to be there. It might just for something. We'll see. I am not going to doubt this show's ability to pull things
that's fair.
anymore.
That's fair.
Misha Green fucking pwned me, so...
There was, in this episode, a lot of the sense of all these pieces being laid in place for the finale. You kind of got that sense. So, yeah, you could very well be right about that. I wrote here on a note I wrote about this if we were going to talk about it, because it just struck me as funny. When Criswell goes and visits the now dying Captain Lancaster, where it finally turns out we get what this is all about, that he's been using black bodies to basically bring himself back to life every time he gets killed, essentially. And he's got this Frankenstein of black body parts. And it's a nice, I say nice, I mean that in a metaphorical sense. It's not nice at all. It's another touch of the old, black bodies being disposable tools for white advancement, essentially. So it's more of that kind of thing. I'm not sure it adds much more at this point, though. I feel like this revelation should probably have happened earlier in the season, because now that Captain Lancaster's dead, why does it really matter? But I did write in my notes here, Captain Lancaster just catches up in a spot of exploding nipples. So Criswell watches him die, and it's like one piece of shit watching another piece of shit die. I don't know how much emotional investment I could have there, but I'm glad one of them's dead. So I've written here Hippolyta Manhattan, as in Dr. Manhattan.
Yep.
Because that seems to be her purpose in the story now.
She got that blue rings.
So she gets them all back to the multi-dimensional machine, because they're making sure not to call it a time machine. I believe Hippolyta actually corrects Tick. It's a multi-dimensional machine. Now, did you notice the clangor here? flat out mistake that they made. It was the fact that they had a big title card saying Kentucky, when in fact this had already been established to be Kansas in episode 8.
Oh,
sorry, episode 7
right.
rather.
Wow.
Misha Green has apparently admitted it was a mistake. But as you can imagine, the internet was full of theories about, does this mean it's an alternate reality? Misha Green just came out and said, no, we fucked up.
We got our places beginning with K mixed up.
Yeah, apparently so. Now, given that Hippolyta is so in tune with the forces of time and space at this point, here's a big question I had. In order for them to go back to Tulsa to retrieve the Book of Names, was there any particular reason why they had to go back to the specific day when the massacre happens?
I also had that thought. I was like, could you go back any other day?
It's like, why did none of them say, Hippolyta, wouldn't it be a good idea to go, I don't know, maybe even just a couple of days before? It seemed a bit of an oversight. I don't know why Hippolyta was so focused on going on that day. I get, for a story perspective, why they needed to go back, but I think they needed to insert some kind of reason why it had to be that day, but they failed to provide one. But oh well. So this is where I'm going to start filleting Michael Gay. Man, when they get to Tulsa, give him all the awards, because every moment he's utterly broken. Like watching the birth and the perpetuation of that cycle of abuse that he was a victim of and that he's been a perpetrator of. All that realization, all the weight of that. Man, you really feel it in every second of his performance. This isn't a scene where these characters have just time travelled. I mean, we're already that, and the way the time travel was treated was almost kind of cursory. So it is that same thing with this show, where the tone is always a wee bit weird. Nothing seems quite as serious as it should be.
Yeah, I did enjoy Hippolyta's technobabble. That was like full Doctor Who. Where everyone's going, what are you talking about? And she's like, no, it's the fucking... And then she's just saying all this stuff.
I've got a bit of uneasiness about them eliciting sympathy from me for Montrose at this point, because I have not forgiven him for what he did to Yahima, and I'm not going to forgive that. So I've got some uneasiness there. But on a human level, I'm like, yeah, this guy is utterly broken. This guy was broken from the start, you know? And this is where I get back on the #fuck Tick train. Like, Tick, give the guy a fucking break, man. Like, Jesus Christ. He's just constantly on his case. You're taking him back to the most harrowing moment in his life, and just give him a moment to get himself together. Tick has been a total tit in this scene, when they're like in the alley and Montrose is like just trying to catch his breath. It's like, fuck's sake, Tick.
Tick the dick. We hate Tick. Great performance.
Great performance. Jonathan Majors
character.
is amazing. But yeah, that's... I guess we're meant to have complicated feelings about Tick. He's definitely not a squeaky clean hero by any stretch of the imagination. But I'm 100% fuck Tick. I hate Tick. Tick's a dickhead. He's not. I don't see how he can redeem himself in my eyes.
Nah, man, I can't wait for him to get fucking sacrificed. Like, I'm down for that. Sorry, I feel really bad as a white viewer saying that about a black guy.
No, I was just about to say that. Like, there is that thing where obviously he's the protagonist of, or at least one of the protagonists of a black-led show, and there is part of me has misgivings about me, Mr. White Dude here, saying fuck Tick. But come on, man. I've watched this guy just shoot women in the face, and they're pulling out women's teeth with pliers. And right, I get the whole thing. Like, here's where this gets a bit complex. There is that whole idea of, for a black veteran, obviously if you're from, and this is something I think the left struggles with generally, is there isn't enough sympathy for veterans of colour. Like, we often treat them the same as white people who are veterans, in the sense that we're always that bit disdainful for having gone out and volunteered to fight in imperialistic wars. I think there has to be a level of complexity that you have to apply to this when it's a person of colour, because historically these are people who come from, for the most part, poorer backgrounds, and because of their standing in society, they haven't historically had the same economic opportunities. So joining the army is often a way to just make money and survive and make sure their family survives. So I want to make sure we are bearing that in mind when we criticise Tick in this sense. I think why I still have a problem with Tick, though, and why I cannot forgive that, is because I don't think the show has done anything to make me think that Tick is actually remorseful of his actions in Korea. He might be remorseful about other things, but not that.
Yeah.
When has he ever expressed remorse about that? Did the show just forget to do that? Or are we meant to be aware that he has not done that? Either way, I'm like, #fuck Tick.
I don't feel like we're meant to forgive Tick. I feel like he's not presented as a remotely sympathetic character anymore.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm sitting. I think there's elements of his character that are certainly a bit grey, but there's that element that element that I'm discussed where I'm just like, nah, fuck tech. If you're going out there and shooting people in the face and pulling out their teeth just because they're communists, fuck you, man. And I get it, you're a soldier, you're doing your job, but there's also that thing about I was following orders was not a valid defence at the Nuremberg trials, and I don't see why it should be deemed a valid defence anywhere else. The very least a person can do after it is express remorse, and I don't think Tick has done that. So that's why I'm still on the hashtag fuck Tick train. As far as the other stuff goes, I mean, he did unleash the F slur against Montrose. Bear in mind, this is in the 1950s. This was not an uncommon view, and it's not an uncommon slur to hurl at someone. It's not even uncommon now, to be honest. So I at least understand the context of that stuff. But yeah, I still don't actually like him per se, and I'm not going to. I don't think that the final episode is going to turn me around into being a Tick fan. But I'm unsure as to whether that's Misha Green's intention anyway. I think Misha Green is intentionally creating a complex character. I mean, all the characters are quite complex. I think what bothers me with the Tick thing, though, is I feel like Letty could do better.
Oh, yeah. Fuck it, man. If she'd hooked up with Babyhead, it would have been a better choice.
Good old Edward Babyhead. So, we better wrap this up. So, we're going to start on Fargo in just a bit, as soon as we get done with this. So, the Tulsa Massacre stuff, this stuff was properly harrowing. Mm-hmm. For me, this was more powerful than what Watchmen did with that same event.
I think it's partially because it spent longer on it.
It also brought it down to the individual human level, I suppose. We got, is it Hattie, Dora's grandmother? Was that her name? I think it was Hattie. That actress was phenomenal. She had an amazing look. When Letty first appeared in the house, I liked that sort of suspicious look that she had, looking down at her sneakers, if you're an American. Yeah, I really dug that. I instantly got the sense that Letty's fooling nobody in this room. So that was all good stuff. There was some good character stuff in there. Again, though, this show moves so fast that there wasn't enough time to really soak up that stuff in a way that I think I would have liked to have seen. What we got was great in essence. So, you mentioned earlier, my theory about Tick being the baseball bat wielding hero who saves George and Montrose turned out to be correct. I will accept your congratulations. Anyone else wants to pass on their congratulations? I am available for predictions about TV shows all year round.
Second accurate prediction about this show that you had, given that your first one was that Christina and Criswell were the same person.
Right, both of those, I do feel the show telegraphed pretty hard though, so I don't know how much, I don't know how much credit I can take for those, but still, when it happened, I was like, yeah, there we go. As soon as I saw the baseball bat, I was like, yep, Woodsy got it. This was harrowing though, watching Montrose watch that whole scene unfold in front of him. I think what made it even more powerful was Montrose was talking himself up into changing it, and he'd even convinced Tick with that. Oh man, that fucking monologue. All the things I've been through, I would still choose to be your father. I'd choose it again. Oh man. Tick was eventually like, oh, you better be fucking sure about this. And so he was about to do it, but he could not bring himself to do it. He just couldn't bring himself to move forward. And Montrose's inability to go through with what he decided to do in that moment, I think was maybe the most heartbreaking part of this episode. And bear in mind, we're talking about an episode in which, it recreates the Tulsa Massacre and we watch a woman burned to death. But that moment was just so human and so heartbreaking. Like, you've got this chance to change the past and he just cannot do it. Here's one thing I thought about. Given that all of this essentially seems like it was set in stone because Tick was always the stranger, does that mean that Letty essentially caused Hattie's death by preventing them from escaping? Because it seemed like there was time for Hattie to escape, and Letty was trying to convince her to give her the Book of Names.
Maybe.
It's something to chew on. It's something to chew on. I want to make mention here of that amazing scene of Letty walking through the bomb blasts.
Oh yeah, that was superhero shit.
It was pretty spectacular. Yeah, I love that she walked and didn't run. We've seen so much of Letty run in this show.
I was going to say, it wasn't like a superhero stride, it was like a walk of resignation, of just pure exhaustion. Really powerful.
I'm glad we got to see the planes, because I think a lot of people forget. This is a real thing. This was an act of war against the black community. Yeah. It wasn't just, armed militias, which is horrific enough, but there was actual bombings of the city. I mean, it's fucking horrendous. It's an act of war. It's only 100 years ago, less. I mean, 100 years ago next year. It's fucking crazy to think of it. Anyway, they eventually return, and Hippolyta, trying to keep the portal open, her hair turns blue, a la Arinthia Blue, Dee's comic book character. I feel like that's another push towards my theory that Dee is somehow precognitive, and that somehow her art has this precognitive function. That was a real comic book moment. It was proper X-Men.
Yeah, I loved that blue rinse when she was just fucking floating in the air. But, oh man, Hippolyta rapidly became like just one of my favourite characters.
Yeah,
you know that
same.
she wasn't like good, or the actress wasn't great before, but when they were just like, also now you're a superhero, I was like, she's fucking brilliant at it, man.
Great stuff. So that leaves us one episode to go. Any predictions on how you think this is going to end?
Ooh, I think I'll leave the predictions up to you, Nostradamus. What do you think is going to happen?
I'll be honest, actually, I'm really not sure. This show has surprised me a few times, so I'm wary to make any more predictions. I don't feel confident at this point. I feel like Misha Green could pull a blinder here and produce something pretty spectacular in this final episode. I think when all's said and done, it still will not be the show I wanted, but nobody gives a fuck what I want. Misha Green clearly doesn't, and why should you? I'm actually quite excited for this final episode, because I feel like I actually do not know what's coming.
Yeah.
I feel like we are going to get that scene where Christina gets Tick where she wants him. As to how that ends, though, I just could not guess at this point.
Well, we will find out in a matter of days from when we're recording this.
By the time this podcast goes out, it's probably been over for about 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys. So yeah, I think what's going to happen is we'll do a wrap up of Lovecraft Country, because I think we've talked about it enough now that we owe it a wrap up. So after our next episode, we'll do a wrap up. I think maybe our next episode will be a combo Lovecraft Country wrap up, and we'll talk a bit more about Fargo, because it will still be ongoing.
Oh yeah, we'll get to Fargo in a minute.
We will get. Well, we're going to start the Fargo chat in just a minute to the tune of Billy Joel. You know what? We could everything we've talked about in this podcast so far, we could easily just compile them all into a set of alternate verses for "We Didn't Start the Fire."
There's your podcast description right there. We'll put that under the episode. So I think, having said all that, I think it's time to go to the bar.
I think you're right. I feel the thirst coming back.
Top up these drinks.
And,
when we come back, dear listener,
we are honestly about to start the Fargo chat.
we'll talk about the first 4 episodes.
Guys, if you've listened this far and all you wanted was Fargo chat, all I can say is thanks.
If all you've listened to this podcast for is the miniature insert podcast, then this has been a treat, frankly.
Thanks for sticking with us. Okay, bar time. We are going to start the Fargo chat to the tune of Billy Joel right after this message.
Show. Fuck, I started in the Sean Connery voice. Show. It's always the danger.
What are you drinking tonight, James?
Tonight I'm drinking Williams Brothers Joker IPA. It's sort of a stalwart of our nights out whenever we're not at the Tron, not the Hamiltron, the other Tron.
Yes.
When when the Tron's shut, we go to another bar where Joker IPA is the beer of choice, and it's a good beer. Williams Brothers, Scottish brewery. Am I right in thinking?
We can mention the name of the pub, Old Hairdressers. Shout out to the Old Hairdressers.
Shout out to the not the old hairdressers, but the old hairdressers.
Yeah, yes. Even though, it could do with being a bit warmer, as you've called it on occasion, the cold hairdressers.
Yeah. If you sit upstairs in the old hairdressers during winter, man, whoa.
Yeah.
Woe betide the boy.
Billy Connolly reference, I understood that reference. Who is this Wobie? I am drinking Connoisseur Pinot Noir, which is,
Pinot Noir.
As you would guess, a Pinot Noir from Chile.
Very
yes,
nice.
I do only drink South American wines. Thank you for asking.
How does the Pinot Noir compare to, for example, the Malbec or the Shiraz?
It certainly goes down easier than a Malbec. It's not as full in terms of its heat and flavour as a Malbec. Mm-hmm. It's somewhere between. It's pitched between a Shiraz and a Malbec.
My favourite Pinot Noir, of which I have one, is also a Pinot Noir which I found impossible to find anywhere out with one restaurant in Australia, which is a real bastard. It's a New Zealand Pinot Noir called Nanny Goat Pinot Noir, which I was out for dinner there back when Sarah lived in Australia and I was visiting her, and it was fucking great. It was so good. It was real. I mean, this restaurant was incredible anyway, but this wine was amazing, and I was like, oh, I'll need to get me a bottle or two when I get home, you know, and nope, can't fucking get it anywhere. So yeah, there's my Pinot Noir story for our listeners. This is the quality content they tune in for. You know,
it is,
don't worry,
yes.
we're going to get to Fargo in a minute.
We're going to start the Fargo chat in just a second. I heard you munching snacks earlier. I don't have any snacks because I've been trying to cut down because in the hell show that is endless living with COVID, I've been trying to cut down because this fucking waistline of mine is not getting any smaller. It is making my life that bit more joyless.
I've been trying to cut down a bit. This is the first night in like 4 nights that I have been drinking.
Your medal is in the post.
Thanks, you know. Thank me for my service. I have gotten a bit concerned for the amount of weight that I put on over lockdown. So much so that I downloaded...
The struggle is real.
Yep, I downloaded a men's workout app.
Welcome to middle age.
Yeah, and I haven't opened it yet. Downloaded it a week ago. But I've done the hard part, which is the
hard part over.
The
hard part is psychologically admitting to yourself that this is a thing you feel inclined to do.
Well, the thing is, you have to like plan what your workout regime is going to be, and it asks you what level you think you're at, and is there anything you can't do? And it's like
in the words of Scunner Campbell.
And I had to actually put in, I have weak knees. And I just thought, fuck my life, man.
Can I just say, this so far is the most on-brand James Hamilton conversation.
When I start talking about my weak knees.
As long as you tie it back to the 90s some way towards the end, where we've hit all the bases.
Yeah, I dislocated my knee 2 years ago, and it's been a bit weak ever since. So... Yeah, both of us trying to cut down, I guess, on our drinking and snacking. Cutting down on the drinking when we have an basically alcohol-based podcast is a little more difficult. But
what could go wrong?
Yeah. Instead of drinking to bring me joy, I've been doing things like, I don't know, spending $5 to download a 1-page tabletop role-playing game called Crash Pandas.
Wait, James, is this an episode of fSobriety?
Yes, it is. Let's cue the music. Hi, and welcome to another episode of fSobriety, where myself and Craig Woods talk about everything connected to board and tabletop role-playing games.
Well, you talk and I listen.
Where I talk and Craig listens. And on this episode, we're going to be discussing Crash Pandas, which is a game by creator Grant Howitt. Grant Howitt specialises in writing and creating role-playing games, of which the rules and everything about them fit on one sheet of A4 paper. So it's not like most games where you get massive books of rules. Everything that you need for it is on one page. He also wrote the game Honey Heist. In Honey Heist...
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. It's just in my head, I'm feeling the Chevy Chase drop come on at any point.
Oh yeah, it's going to be in here. In the game Honey Heist, for example, the players all play bears who have to do a movie-style heist. And you have two statistics. One is criminal and one is bear. And depending on what you do, you flip points between whether you're a criminal or a bear. It's pretty amazing. The one I just downloaded, Crash Pandas. In fact, Crash Pandas is best explained if I read you the opening paragraph.
Oh, please do. I can't wait for this.
Why are you, a raccoon, entering the world of illegal street racing in Los Angeles? Are you a wide-eyed rookie or a grizzled veteran? Are you in this for love, fortune, fame, or justice?
Are you sure that's the opening to a role-playing game? There's no way you cannot convince me that is not the opening paragraph to Donald Trump's re-election manifesto.
I mean, yeah, the players play a group of raccoons who enter an illegal street race. And it's sort of like a tabletop RPG meets a sort of like racing game, and it's brilliant. There's an editor's note that says, "Don't ever have anyone question the fact that the players are raccoons. Just let it happen. None of the raccoons can die ever. Cartoon physics applies, and it's hilarious. And I'm really looking forward to running people through this nonsense. Grant Howitt's written a bunch of games. They all have like serious humour underlying them. It's the kind of thing that if someone plays regular games of like say like Dungeons and Dragons,
first of all gay, second of all stupid,
or Blades in the Dark, or Shadowrun, or any of those kind of things, and if they get bored of playing the same sort of thing every time they play, it's the kind of thing you can take a break and go, well, this week we're going to be pandas who are street racing. It's basically going to be the Fast and the Furious.
Nice.
If you're interested in sort of tabletop role-playing games in general and taking a comedy break in particular, I would suggest check out GS Howitt, that's GSHOWIT.itch.io, or check him out on Patreon at patreon.com/GS Howitt, same spelling, and support him.
I'll put the link in the episode description.
Cool. All of his games are free to download, or you can pay as well. But yeah, so that's my plan to get me through the next however long the shit show lasts.
Yeah, fair enough. At least you've got a plan, James.
I'm planning, as we both know.
It's half the bottle.
Okay, that's been another episode of fSobriety. We'll catch you next time where we'll be discussing more nerdy shit. Toodle pip.
Good ep.
Yeah, yet another brilliant episode of fSobriety.
All right, James. You know what we're going to do now? I think I mentioned it once earlier. I think we're gonna.
I think we've wrapped up this episode, right?
We've talked
about everything that
it's actually slipped my mind. We should just wrap up. All right, thanks for joining us. Psych!
It's not like we've got far to go.
On that note, we're now going to start the Fargo chat. As we mentioned previously, this is your first experience of Fargo. How are you finding it so far, just briefly?
Okay, I'm really enjoying it so far. This might be a weird thing to say, given it's a Noah Hawley show. But having watched all of Legion and been a big fan of Legion, I did not expect Fargo to be so Noah Hawley as it is. Mm-hmm. It's a little weirder than I thought it was going to be, but also just really enjoying it. It's really well made, really intriguing, oddly blackly humorous, and I'm glad that, given that Lovecraft Country is wrapping up, that I have another weekly Sunday night thing to check out, because I was like, oh no, what's going to be next? And I'm glad I've fallen into it, and it's made me want to go back and rewatch the first 3 seasons, as you mentioned earlier. Mm-hmm. If there's like a chronological order that the seasons take place in, I can watch them in that as well. But yeah, really enjoying it.
This current season is, I said earlier, this is the earliest that we've been in the Fargo universe in the 1950s. So season 2 is the late 70s, and then seasons 3 and 4 are both in the 20s. No, season 1 is, I think, the mid 2000s, and I think season 3 is like the 2010s. So this one is going way back to the history. Fargo is an oddball show. I mean, it really is. I mean, the whole idea, first of all, of taking a Coen Brothers movie and then just extrapolating a whole universe within which that movie sits. And the movie is not necessarily even the centre of the universe. It's just one of the many tales that could be told in that universe. It's such a strange premise because there's so many things you could do with it. But Noah Hawley clearly seems to have had a very specific idea of what kind of universe that was, of the kind of existential logic that works in that universe. And Fargo is a really existential show, but it's existential with a sense of humour, as you just said. It has a laugh out loud sense of humour quite often, and it is very blackly humorous, but it also has a lot of really rich characterization. There's also really quite romantic character moments in places. As you say, it is very Noah Hawley, and it's more Noah Hawley than it is Coen Brothers. It is very much Noah Hawley's view of the Coen Brothers, and something we'll probably touch on as we get talking here. He does often make references to Coen Brothers movies, and each season is always littered with Easter eggs to different Coen Brothers movies. And I'll mention a few as we go ahead, as we talk about what we've seen so far in season 4, because there's been a few.
I read that basically in order to get the show off the ground originally, like the reason that he was allowed to do it is because the Coen brothers were so impressed with what he came to them with that it was just like, I want to make a show based on the movie. What do you think? And they were like, it's all yours.
Yeah, that's basically what happened. Yeah, and the Coens are not really involved in the show, but they've got the executive producer credits, and I guess the show would never have happened if the Coens had said nah. So. Yeah, it was. They gave their blessing, but it's very much Noah Hawley's vision. I will say, I do feel like each season gets progressively more Hawley-esque. Now that we're used to the language that he presented to us in Legion, I feel like I can identify that a lot more. He's pushing the boat out a bit more in the Hawley direction each season.
There's a certain way he does scene transitions where the screen splits and different images appear in the splits and then form into one scene that it then transitions into. That was like very prevalent in Legion. That the first time I saw it in Fargo, I was like, "Ooh, it's a Hawley joint."
yeah, 100%. This is the first season of Fargo since 2017, and I think the first season came out 2014, and then the second one the year after. So they were fairly regular at first, but it's not like Noah Hawley has not been busy, because since the previous season we've had the entirety of Legion.
So wait, was Legion post season 3 of Fargo?
I think, if I remember right, season 1 of Legion did come out 2017, so if they were at least kind of concurrent in terms of, I think the pre-production on Legion was happening while Fargo season 3 was in production. I think that's the way it worked. I need to go back and check, but definitely they both came out in 2017. And Legion was a yearly show, 2017 to 2019. So the entirety of Legion happened in that time, and he also made that movie Lucy in the Sky with Natalie Portman. So he's been busy, and he did say, I actually thought there would not be any more Fargo after season 3, because once we got into the thick of Legion, and I heard he was going to be directing a movie, and then he actually came out in several interviews at that time saying, I don't know if there will be another season of Fargo because I don't currently have any ideas for it. And then suddenly, like, I think it was just over a year ago, he just came out and said, okay, I've got this new season together, I've blocked it all out, it's probably going to be the most ambitious one yet. And I was like, yes! So, yeah, hopefully there's going to be more, because I love spending time in this universe that he's created. As I mentioned earlier, it is all set in one universe, and characters do occasionally cross over from season to season. You do not always recognise them, however, because obviously they take place in different times. There's also just strong connective tissue between each season anyway, so there are characters you might only hear mentioned or talked about at some point do make appearances in another season, kind of thing. That's already happened in season 4. In fact, you alluded to it earlier. There is, I'm not going to give anything away here, but all of the Fargo fans have spotted one character in this season who it seems is the same character that plays a very specific major role in season 2. And Noah Hawley has pretty much confirmed that it is that character.
Right.
But they've not been named by that name yet, so at some point it's going to turn around that that's who that character is. Yeah, it's pretty cool, because the first time I saw the character, and when I clicked on what the names were around the character, I was like, hang on a second. And so we're getting to see that character's origin story in the background of this season, which is pretty cool. So Fargo is often a slow burn. It takes a while to get going, usually. A bit like this fucking podcast, some people might say. But those would be unkind people.
Those would be, yeah, that's a more, I guess... That's a more contemporary pelter to our own podcast than my Louis Buñuel one earlier on.
I mean, it often... I think maybe this season has the biggest ensemble cast it's ever had, but it is always an ensemble affair each season. So it does take a while to bed in and get your bearings with each of the characters. And I think some viewers can just find that a bit off-putting sometimes.
I enjoyed in episode 1 how long it took for the opening titles
for the
to come
titles,
up.
Yeah.
We know though from Legion that Hawley doesn't really care where the titles go in an episode.
No, that's certainly true. Yeah, he likes to play fast and loose with the established rules of these things. This show does actually get mixed reviews a lot of the time. People are either really passionate about it, or they just clearly do not get it and it's just not for them. It is one of those Marmite kind of shows. That said, though, I think the first season of the show was maybe the most accessible, and so a lot of people have been kind of disappointed. A lot of critics have voiced their disappointment with subsequent seasons because it's not been the same as the first one, I guess. That first season is great, but as I say, it has gotten more Holly-esque with each progressive season. The show has always had a really strong grasp of the absurd, and you've surely noticed that by now.
Yep.
It really wears that on its sleeve, and I think it's one of those. It's a bit like what David Lynch does in a way, not in terms of the surrealism, but in that sense of there is something very true to life about things that are utterly absurd. The absurd is not something that exists in the abstract; it's something that exists in real life. And we've all had experiences where you've told anecdotes to people about things that you've witnessed that seem utterly absurd, but they become legends and they become stories that people tell to other people because they were so absurd. The absurd is a real thing, and it exists. It has agency in our daily lives, and Fargo is one of those shows that puts the absurd center stage and really, for me, really kind of explores the truth of that absurdity. It's never just absurdity for the sake of, haha, isn't this weird and crazy? There's always this, where the existential thing comes in is there's always the fatalistic element of how people find themselves in the most dire circumstances is always tied up with the absurd. Mm-hmm. So even the funniest moments in Fargo are also simultaneously tragic. And I've always found it quite a powerful show in that sense. A lot of people, a lot of critics specifically, don't quite give it its due for how deep it is in that sense. I actually think it does get pretty deep. Now, the title Fargo, many people ask, why is it even called Fargo? The show has never been set in Fargo. The Coen Brothers movie is not even set in Fargo. And I think what Noah Hawley was trying to do, and it's one of the things I love most about the show, is Fargo is one of those cities in the Midwest that is an idea in and of itself. It's just a place it's not the metropolis of the East Coast or the West Coast. It's a metropolis that exists in a zone that's culturally not as claimed as much in a way by culture and popular culture as the West Coast is or the East Coast is. And so it's like a legendary, it's like myth making. It's a mythical place where the myth could be anything because the myths have yet to be written in a way. This season is the furthest south we've ever been. We're in Missouri for this one. So it's got a slightly different vibe this season, but certainly, as I say, it's all connected. The details of this season, it's kind of funny that this is your introduction to this universe because there's a lot of ways in which this season is already kind of standing outside some of the established rhythms and some of the established aesthetics of the previous seasons. There's not the usual, how the whole Minnesota nice became a thing after Fargo, and that's always been a strong element in the previous seasons. It's not so much in this season. We've only got one character who we know is from that region, and she is easily one of the most sinister characters. And
but she has that fucking hilarious accent.
Yeah, her veil of Minnesota nice is turned in. It's kind of turned inside out. It's she's the sinister dark side of this whole thing. Also, this is the most out and out, straight up. This is a crime story, a gangster story. Right from the off, that's the first time this story has really served that up to us. Usually we're introduced to this via domestic scene or via police procedural scene. We don't get the gangsters usually up front, so that's changed things slightly. This season actually, it's kind of got a bit of a low budget Boardwalk Empire feel about it, which effectively is what these gangs are, because the big cities on the coast were where the big crime families were more interested. Those were the areas they were more interested in consolidating their power, and everything else came afterwards. And so in a way, these smaller offshoots of those big crime families have kind of got to fight it amongst themselves.
No one ever thinks when you talk about like organised crime, your brain doesn't automatically go to Kansas City.
No, right, exactly. And there is a Kansas crime family who actually are Italian, but it's one of those things, and they are an offshoot, obviously, of the mafia. But yeah, it's one of those things that's just a bit. It's not something you see portrayed on screen that often. I mean, Kansas City. I don't even know when I've even seen Kansas City on screen. I'm sure I have, but I'm not thinking of any examples off the top of my head. It's usually mentioned, but not actually seen.
This is going to be a weird thing to say, but I think I've spent more hours in Kansas City than I have watching it on a TV screen, which for most places in America is not true.
# tour diaries. So there's this theme of cultural identity is always prevalent in Fargo in every season. Maybe never more so than in this present one, though, because here we've got the Irish, we've got the Italians, we've got the African Americans, all of whom at this point in time are facing discrimination, all at different levels. It's quite interesting this, because this is one of those things I think often gets forgotten, that Irish and Italians were discriminated against like this for quite a long time. It's not the same as the African American experience. And I think this is one of the things the show is getting at, that actually these forms of discrimination are not the same. Because the Irish and the Italians can essentially, it's easier for them to actually become Americans in the long run than it is, ironically, for African Americans. And what we're seeing here is kind of the early 50s. This is really just a couple of decades maybe before you get very powerful, influential Italian figures in American society. And by which point, you know, by the time you get to the 70s, the whole idea of anti-Italian bigotry, if you like, in the US, is kind of already forgotten by that point. Whereas, you know, we only need to look at the way things have panned out. That African Americans, they've never been through that same experience. So I do feel like the show is raising these kind of things in an interesting way. So Fargo sometimes for me, and this might sound like a weird way a weird analogy to use, but it's like a spin on Casualty. What I mean by that is, for listeners, Casualty is a long-running UK TV drama about, as the title suggests, a casualty department in a city hospital. A casualty department
ER.
is an ER.
Yeah, it's basically Casualty was like Britain's ER before ER was ER.
Yeah, it's been on since the mid '80s.
Even sparked its own spin-off.
Yeah, Holby City. Which
was like the UK Grey's Anatomy, I guess.
It is, yeah, essentially it's all the other departments of the hospital.
I'm going to insert the Casualty theme under that, because the Casualty theme tune's fucking amazing.
It bangs, fucking slaps, dude. But the reason I bring up this comparison is because the template for a lot of Casualty episodes, and people often make a joke about this in British culture, is that, okay, which of these characters that we've been introduced to this episode is going to suffer something really horrendous, and in what way? And Fargo often pans out that way. Like the first couple of episodes, or certainly the first episode of each season, you're introduced to a small bunch of characters, and it's usually, okay, which of these characters is going to fuck up really badly, and how are they going to make it worse? Because that is essentially the pattern for Fargo. And I guess it's kind of a riff on William H. Macy's character in the movie.
Yeah.
The way he tries to set up this quasi-kidnapping of his wife, and then, of course, it all just goes horrendously wrong. It's full of people who bite off a wee bit more than they can chew, just out of their own desperation, and then each of them has this level of hubris that prevents them from being able to know when to quit. And so each season just has an ongoing avalanche of calamities, basically. It's a bit harder to pin down with this season because all of our characters pretty much, or certainly the majority of them, are already involved in organised crime. So it's a slightly different flavour, where usually we've got, as our main characters, a kind of everyman or everywoman. I think our everyman with this is probably Ethel Reader, who's the daughter of the Undertaker, the Smutneys. They seem to be the most ordinary, quote-unquote, characters we've got so far this season. And we know that they have borrowed money from Loy Cannon, Chris Rock's character. There's that. That's never a good thing. Being in debt to a gang boss, never a good thing. So right away, the first episode of this season tells us, okay, there's going to be something going on that a bit sticky with these characters. So it seems like they're the best bets for that. However, so many of our criminal characters also seem a bit inept. So I'm suspecting that we're just going to see, just piled on one after the other, various forms of hubris leading to major mistakes, major misjudgments, and it's just going to get more blackly humorous as we go along. The double bind with this, of course, is, and this I think you'll probably agree, the first few episodes of this season has already got me caring a great deal for some of these characters, and by the end of episode 4, it looks like some of those characters have the sword of Damocles hanging over them now.
Yep,
I'm like, yikes.
For sure.
So yeah, we're definitely in for a ride for the 11 episodes this season. Normally it's only 10. I did read that Noah Hawley kindly asked FX to give him an extra one because he had too much material.
Nice. It's good. So, I feel like FX obviously have FX Network probably have a you get what you want Noah Hawley sort of pass, you know.
Yeah, definitely for sure. So our first episode, I think one of the first most ridiculous things that happened is, well, first of all, we get this ritual between the gangs where they swap sons. I don't know that this has ever happened anywhere, because logically it does not make sense. But, you know, this is the absurd universe of Fargo, so I guess you just accept it. But I do enjoy this legacy that they give us, because it does make Ben Wishaw's character, who they now call Rabbi Milligan, he's a bit of a wild card. I mean, the fact he killed his own father is pretty severe. And it's like, because the fact he got basically swapped off to the Jewish gang, and it was quite clear his father did not give a fuck whether he came back or not. His father was clearly a callous man. And so then having to repeat the process with the Italians, he just thought, you know what, fuck this. I'm just joining the Italians on a full-time basis. But we see here, even have all that sacrifice earned him no respect, because clearly the Italians do not cut him any slack whatsoever. He's just Rabbi Milligan. He's both Jewish and Irish, and he'll never be Italian. And it's, give this guy a break, man. So he cuts quite a tragic figure at the moment, but he's the one who's currently in charge of Chris Rock's son, who goes by the name of Satchel. And I'm quite enjoying watching how that relationship is going to pan out, because Satchel is clearly a bit pissed off with his father at this point. And we know Rabbi Milligan can probably relate to that, so I don't know, it should be interesting to see how that pans out.
Yeah, I really like the relationship between those two characters. Like, the scenes that they're in together are really nice, because Rabbi seems to have like genuine concern for him, because he's like, fuck it, I've been where you were.
Yeah, I've been there, exactly. Yeah. So one of the most ludicrous things we get in that first episode is this scene after the Cannon gang meet up with the Fadas, the Italian gang, in that park, which I love the understated humour of that whole scene, like where they're just dissing each other. The fact that Josto, Jason Schwartzman's character, just cannot even come up with a good insult, and they're just all laughing at the fact his insults are poor. It's like, that doesn't even make sense, man. And amongst all that, you have this heavy kind of there's supposed to be a deal go down here. Chris Rock is trying to get control of the slaughterhouse, and Donatello Fado is kind of saying, nah, that's not going to fly. And the Cannon gang are kind of trying to push it. Doesn't come to anything. Then we get that journey back in the Fada car. We get what I've written here is the way I've written here. This is basically a scene from The Untouchables, but with fart jokes. Because you have this major tense scene where they're sitting in the car. You see the kids playing with the cap guns. You see like members of the Cannon gang hanging around in the street, and you're like, it's amping up the tension the whole time. You're like, what's going to happen here? Something's definitely going to happen. Somebody's going to get shot or something. Somebody does get shot, but not in the way we think. Don Fada gets shot in the neck with a pellet. And the Fada gang are so apparently inept, they don't even know where it's come from. And we get the almighty fart from Donatello Fada. I'm going to say at this point, we don't normally get this level of fart joke in Fargo. Or should I say fart go. How did you enjoy this scene?
I thought it was brilliant. I didn't think he was actually going to end up getting shot at all once he'd had the fart, because I was like, they built this up to the point where you think he's going to get shot, and then, oh no, he's just having a heart attack.
Yeah, having a cardiac arrest or something. Yeah.
And then he just farts. I was buckled. There was tears streaming from my eyes watching it.
It's
and
pretty
then
spectacular.
The kid's like BB gun goes off, his neck explodes. I was like, what?
Yeah,
surely BB guns don't do that much damage to the human body.
No, that's full on Noah Hawley absurdity at that point. It's spectacular. And I guess it's the kind of thing that either works for you, it doesn't. I saw a lot of critics were really quite critical of that series, that it was just far too broad in terms of the comedy. I can see that criticism, but I'm here for it. It worked for me. I was laughing all the way in the next two scenes, and I'm not normally a sucker for fart jokes, but the way that whole scene was staged, just the pulling the rug out from the amping of the tension was, I thought, splendidly done. Donatello Fada, he's not allowed to come into the fancy hospital because the administrator there, Dr. Harvard, who is one of many improbably named characters on this show. We'll get to some of those names in a minute. He's not having any of it, so they have to take him to the low-rent public hospital, where we are introduced to Nurse Orietta Mayflower, also an utterly improbable name. I do like, though, the implication of the name Mayflower, being that it's the name of the ship that brought the Pilgrims.
Yep.
It also brought many diseases to North America. So I do feel that's a definite nod on Noah Hawley's part. So at this point, she seems like she's the big bad, which, considering this is a crime story involving gangsters, I'm like, this is just fantastic.
She is so deeply psychotic.
This episode lets us know that immediately, but it doesn't do it in any kind of pantomime villain way. The scene that precedes this, actually, we see her at the funeral home, and she actually is talking to Ethelreda, and she has all that weird racially charged language that she uses when she's saying, your mother must be very dark, because in my studies of people of colour, it's like, what the fuck are you going on about? It's like, you sound like someone who's got, probably volumes and volumes of text on skull measurements and shit like that, you know what I mean? All of that stuff was deeply sinister. So I think Noah Hawley did a great job with the writing there, letting us know that, this character, she is the Minnesota nice on top, but he wanted us to know right away, no, this is all is not right on this ship. So this scene between her and Josto, played by Jason Schwartzman, he's clearly losing it, and it's made clear to us that Josto is pretty inept as far as stepping into the shoes here of Donatello Fada. They're both getting out their tits on Nurse Mayflower's stash that she's clearly robbing the pharmacy in the hospital. This scene where they're just getting, spaced together, she actually has a line where she says something like, one of the problems with the world is people do not use the correct words and they don't express themselves properly. Which I feel is preparing us for what happens next when he says, promise me you'll take care of him.
Yeah.
She automatically seems to assume, of course I'll kill him.
I just say, the casting wise, I think Jason Schwartzman as a mob boss is fucking genius. Because he's the last guy you would expect to be a mob boss.
The casting of him in this role has come in for quite a bit of criticism, by the way.
Really?
Yes, a lot of people saying he's just unbelievable in this role, and I'm like, well, the point of the matter is he is inept. He's not supposed to be believable. I think what Schwartzman is doing here in his performance is actually really quite multifaceted, because he does have an edge. There's no doubt that Josto has an edge, and I think we see more of it in the most recent episode.
Yeah.
He can be dangerous, and he's clearly got wits, he's got intelligence, but for whatever reason, he's just not able to convincingly wield power, and the people under him are a bit, I don't know if he's the guy for this job. And he's clearly aware of that, and it's making him have a bit of an inferiority complex, which is why he feels he's got to kind of flex the muscle. However, he was not meaning to flex it quite so much to result in the death of Don Fada. But Orietta Mayflower reads it that way, and she effectively kills him. There's a lot going on here with Orietta Mayflower's character. Let's pause for a moment and talk about her. Jessie Buckley is knocking it out of the park with this performance, because it's such a weird portrayal. Because this is going to sound like a weird thing to say. This character makes me think of Tom Waits, and what I mean by that is this is someone who, ever since they were very young, was waiting to get old. Because the way Jessie Buckley plays this character, even the way she stands and her posture and the way she carries herself, the way she walks, is the actions of a much older woman. And it's like she's a woman in her 30s who's almost role-playing a much older woman.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of Tom Waits in that sense, where if you listen to his earlier albums, they're hard to listen to in places, because it's like, this is a really young guy pretending he's an old barfly. And it's not until he gets a bit older then he actually evolves into becoming that persona that you're like, all right, now I get it. Jessie Buckley's kind of got a bit of that going on in this role, and it's the kind of thing that I've seen some critics point it out as being a bit of a weakness in the casting, and I'm like, nah, that's clearly deliberate. This is clearly an affectation on her part. There's a line in the most recent episode that I'm going to mention later about people presenting themselves as something they're not, and I feel like this is something that Noah Hawley is definitely angling towards. So I think we're meant to think that Jessie Buckley's character is a bit uncomfortable in her own skin, and so she has this armor where she realizes on some level she's a bit of a caricature, but she 100% believes in that caricature is going to be what she becomes, essentially.
Yep.
That scene where she actually kills Donatello Fada, again,
sinister,
played slightly for laughs.
There you go.
essentially sitting on him. Yeah, all the Minnesota nice stuff. Yeah, that's great stuff, and that's the kind of black humour this show revels in.
It's just the way she's got that hilarious accent and that way about her. She's just like, all the pain will go away. There you go.
That's you,
after injecting the fucking poison into his IV. Man, I was equal parts horrified and couldn't stop laughing at that.
Bit of a side note here, I don't know about you, but I was getting some Fire Walk With Me Missing Pieces vibes when she slipped the ring off Donatello Fado's finger and pocketed it.
Yep.
It's a Twin Peaks reference for you kids.
In case anyone who's listening doesn't realise. We quite like Twin Peaks.
We may have mentioned it once. So she is 100% a predator on various levels. She's also predatory on Josto, and we see more of that in the next few episodes.
I love how Josto never knows who she is, though.
Right, exactly. Yeah. The interesting thing about the way the scene in the first episode is played is we're not quite sure, I don't think at that point, whether Josto even means, can you please kill him? And I think it's played quite cleverly because we've heard that phrase used so many times in mafia movies and crime movies, take care of him, that it could be read either way. But it does turn out that Josto was just literally meaning, can you please take care of him? But yeah, she's a total predator, and it also makes me, from the very first episode, it makes me really worried for Ethelreda, because it becomes clear that she's chosen Ethelreda as one of her pet projects, and that can never be good.
No, in fact, when she says, it could be one of my little projects, you're like, in what way? And then she makes a fucking, poisonous pie.
How many fucking projects have you had, and what is the end goal of said project?
Yeah.
I'm unsure, to be honest, what she has in store. Certainly what happens in episode 4, it's complicated matters. We'll get to that in a minute. Well, we need to discuss Ethelreda's character, because I don't think Ethelreda is going to be a pushover. Yeah. Ethelreda is we do often in this show, we get a voiceover character who kind of sets the stage. And it's interesting that Holly chose Ethelreda to do this, because she is one of the everyman characters on this show, and she's a bit separate from most of what's going on. But she, better than anyone, kind of sets the stage culturally and historically for where we are. I really enjoyed that montage of her at school where she's continually having to go to the principal's office, and there's a line that I did hoot at, but it's also quite a devastating line, where she goes to the principal and said, why are you here again? What is it this time?
When she says, I punched.
Well, I punched that other girl in the fist with my eye, obviously. It's a way, it kind of demonstrates to us that this is someone who's very much aware of their own oppression and aware that there's no point in trying to fight it. And the best she can do is just sling out these sarcastic barbs, knowing full well this cycle is just going to continue. Again, that's the kind of fatalistic existential thing that I think Fargo does really well. And it does it in a comedic way that makes you fond of the character immediately. And it's a sucker punch, because you then think, as soon as you've noticed that you're fond of that character, you're like, man, this really sucks. I actually wrote in my notes here, she's kind of the Fargo version of Dee from Lovecraft Country. That's not just my lazy avatar for, hey, we've got another teenage black girl, but she also is clearly very educated and also very self-educated, and she's also very creative, also got a very inquisitive mind. It's kind of interesting we're getting both of these shows at the same time. And the fact they're both set historically in the same era must be something in the water. Hopefully not some of Orietta Mayflower's Ipecac.
Yep.
Some of that opening also reminded me of Raising Arizona, just with the way it sets the tone.
Totally.
So that's definitely one of the early Coen brothers references in this season. I think Ethelreda's parents are also in some ways the classic Fargo staples of a family in debt. We have seen this before, and it is, of course, it's a staple in a lot of crime stories. Every man and any man can end up in this position where, sometimes you've got to turn to the most sinister people around you because you know they're the only people that can help you when you get that desperate. And Fargo often shows us these, what are unfortunate innocents, essentially being tempted towards involvement with dark forces that they are not ready to contend with. Now, I did mention earlier that also kind of extends to some of the criminal characters, because Josto is also out of his depth here. There's no way that Josto can step into the shoes of Don Fada. He's not at that level of... First of all, it's clear nobody respects him. So he's got that hurdle. And you can actually even interpret Nurse Mayflower's inability to interpret his order as a kind of him failing to actually get across his meaning. In a way, it's his own fault. Like, he's not able to actually make his own intentions clear. Also, that is kind of typical of Fargo, for chaos to ensue from a simple misunderstanding. And Josto's flaw here is his own pettiness and his own insecurity, and we see this afterwards. He becomes so obsessed with the hospital administrator that he ends up being... It's not even he puts out a hit, he has to be present at the hit.
Yeah.
It's like, Josto, that is not how this is done. And of course it ends up going wrong, and we get this wealthy socialite benefactor to the hospital killed. It's like, dude, what the fuck are you doing? So we have to talk about Gaetano, who is Josto's Italian brother, who's here to kind of make his own mark.
Man, that guy is amazing.
I have mixed feelings, right, about this guy's performance. He's clearly a good actor, right? I'm not sure I'm enjoying all the wide swiveling eyes. I feel like his eyes are going to roll right out of his head at some point.
I love it. He's like an old 40s or 50s Disney bad guy from like an animated Disney movie. He looks like that.
He does. Yeah. He's got a touch of the Bluetooth from Popeye about him as well.
I'm loving every element of his performance. But you know, the worst part is, I was like, the only thing I think is maybe slightly over the top about his performance is his accent, and then I realised he is actually Italian.
Yeah. I thought that as well.
Shit, cool.
Fargo does often get pretty good mileage out of some ridiculous, exaggerated performances, but I don't know. I've mixed feelings about this one. I wouldn't have made my mind up about it until we see what becomes of the character, I guess, because I don't know how convinced we're supposed to be in him being a scary character or a comedic character, and it could go either way for me at this point. It's clear he's not much better equipped to be head of this family. He wouldn't be really a good replacement for Josto, because it's just replacing one set of flaws with another.
Yeah, he's crazy. He's 100% a mercenary. He has that whole monologue about what he did during the war, and he's like, we killed communists.
Mussolini's teeth.
Yeah. Until we got paid more to kill fascists. Like.
Right, exactly. And it's like, where do your values lie, Gaetano? And it's also clear that the people around him would be quite happy to be shot of him. All the guys around Josto, whenever Gaetano is around, they're all like, this guy is freaking me out, man. Can we just get him out of here?
There is a lot of shoegazing when he's in the room.
Yeah, the only one who seems comfortable around him is the spectacularly named Constant Calamita. Now that guy, holy shit, he looks straight from the 1930s.
Yep. That
face, man, it's incredible. He's also the snappiest dresser this side of Saul Goodman. I love what that guy brings, the energy he brings to this. It's a proper old school gangster vibe, and the way he's just constantly walking around, either kind of filing his nails or inspecting his buttons and looking down at his shoes whenever somebody's talking to him. It's a great performance.
He wouldn't look out of place in one of the 1940s Warner Brothers Sherlock Holmes films.
Yeah, totally.
The Basil Rathbone era ones. He would as a villain would fit in perfectly with those.
He's also got one of those faces that's a bit like an illustration of what an artist would think a gangster looks like.
Yeah.
It's like a bit of a Dick Tracy character. So we have to talk about the Cannon gang. Lloyd Cannon, how are you feeling about Chris Rock in this role?
I am thinking that Chris Rock is a bit of a revelation.
I think so as well. I'm actually surprised at how subtle his performance is.
That is the thing that got me.
Understated.
We've all seen Chris Rock be over the top, even from his stand-up and stuff, man. I really like Chris Rock. I think he's great, and I didn't think, I'm not going to like Chris Rock in this, but it's not the performance I expected, and I think he's really bringing a subtlety to it. There's a lot going on under the surface. It's
a really subtle performance, and it's really nuanced as well, I think. I've been following what the critics have been saying about this season so far. Chris Rock's performance is coming in for a bit of stick, by the way. There's a lot of people are not particularly convinced by it. I think they feel he's doing too little. I think he's doing just enough. I think there is a sense that Noah Hawley is hedging his bets a wee bit at this point. He's keeping us in the dark a wee bit about just how dangerous Lloyd Cannon could be. We do not yet know just how vicious or harsh he might become. Certainly he's keeping himself in check, and certainly compared to what's going on with the Italians, Lloyd Cannon seems to have it going on. He's got a good head on his shoulders. He's got good people around him. If you had to place a bet at the moment on which gang is going to come out on top, my money's certainly on the Cannons, because they seem to have a more efficient operation and their boss seems to know what day it is.
Yep.
There's some interesting things going on with Lloyd Cannon's character in terms of him being very much the ambitious black capitalist, and that he he's got a lot to say about capitalism, and he also has one of my favourite things here was that he comes up with the idea of a credit card.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Which they try to sell to the bank, and the bank is having none of it because it just seems like such a far-flung idea. And secondly, what I thought was a nice bit of irony in Noah Hawley's writing when the bank manager says, "Oh, we couldn't possibly be preying on our customers' lack of funds. That's not what we do in banks." It's an on-the-nose moment, but it's a perfect commentary on precisely what banking became in the subsequent decades. Apparently, the history of the credit card is quite complex, and nobody knows quite who came up with it originally. There are precursors to it in the late 19th century, which were not cards, obviously, but were basically tokens. So there was precedence, but nobody knows, it seems like, who actually came up with the idea for a credit card, and it just seems to be a point around about the late 50s, early 60s, when it just became the thing to do.
The monologue he has about what do people want? They don't necessarily want to be rich, they just want to appear rich was really good.
Yes, yeah. And I feel like that's definitely part of the subtext that Hawley is going for and part of his critique about American culture here. So Lloyd Cannon is definitely the spokesman for that element of Hawley's vision in this season. I think he's doing a good job with it because I don't think he's doing too much of the explaining the subtext. I think that's just enough. We do see that. It's another scene I'm remembering where there's the guy outside panhandling, and Lloyd Cannon has that
the roll
speech
of notes,
where he shows him the roll of notes, and a lot of what he says in that scene, it only seems sinister in the context of we know this guy is a gangster, but essentially what he's saying are the same things that CEOs say on a regular basis on their social media about encouraging people to be ambitious for the good of society, for society to be productive, to have a productive economy. Harken back to what we were saying in our first Mr. Robot episode about the invisible hand of capitalism.
Yeah.
There's a lot of crossover there.
The way Chris Rock delivers that whole monologue is kind of reminiscent of one of the more kind of quieter moments of a Chris Rock stand-up show. So I think he's really good at delivering long monologues. Obviously, having like a long career in stand-up, you have to have that ability to just hold an interest while going on and on and on about a subject, and the way he delivers it I thought was really, really good. It was like a total performance, and it wasn't over the top, there was no moustache twirling and going maha.
Exactly. It's pragmatic. Everything is all delivered in a kind of pragmatic tone. He's presenting himself as the epitome of pragmatism. He's also comparatively compassionate, Lloyd Cannon, compared to the other gangsters. Because we see him, he has to take this young Italian kid in, and for what we've seen so far, he is actually quite compassionate towards the kid, whereas Satchel has been just kind of shoved off to one side with Rabbi Milligan, and it is a bit of a contrast. But I think what's interesting about Lloyd Cannon's compassion, it does stem from what you could see as being a kind of conservatism. I mean, it's dependent on one thing, old-fashioned family values. And for as long as this kid is in my house, he's part of the family kind of thing. There's also the idea, though, that any beneficiary to Lloyd's compassion is really dependent on their adherence to conservative capitalist values. And I think because gangsters are gangsters, they're all in the same game, that's part and parcel of how Lloyd is seeing his opposites in the Italians. So he's basically treating the kid in the same way that he's hoping his own kid is being treated by the Italians. But it turns out that the Italians have way more of a lax compassion. So we have to talk about Dr. Senator, who is Lloyd Cannon's consigliere. Easily got the best name in this show, Dr. Senator.
Fucking amazing.
And this is a show with no shortage of quite improbable names, as we said. But Dr. Senator is pretty great. I'm really enjoying this actor's performance. Glenn Turman is the actor's name. If you check out IMDb, this guy has a filmography longer than your arm. He's appeared in just about every TV show you can name from the last 5 decades. Clearly a veteran actor and delivering some quality stuff on this show. But he's clearly the superior strategist for the Cannon gang, and it's pretty clear that there is no equal in the Italian gang, I don't think. I think the closest the Italians have got, I believe his name is it Abel Volante, who is the other consigliere? They occasionally meet up in the cafe. But I don't think he's got the same head and his shoulders that Dr. Senator's got.
Yeah, every time those two characters have a scene together, it always seems like Dr. Senator is just that, like, one step ahead.
Definitely.
Like, in planning and intellectually and everything, you know?
Yeah, and they're both very old school. But yeah, Dr. Senator apparently has lived a lot more.
there was the scene in episode 4, which I thought was kind of interesting, when the Italian consigliere is meeting up with Dr. Senator, and he's basically saying to Dr. Senator, it's like the sort of flip of what we were talking about earlier, where he's basically telling Dr. Senator it's easier for you. Like, he's talking about him as if you Americans came here and you stole, and he's like, well, I found out what it was to be American, and he keeps referring to Dr. Senator as you Americans.
Right.
Which is so weird.
It's so off the mark, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's particularly tone deaf on Violante's part, considering the monologue that Dr. Senator gave him in the previous episode, which, by the way, amazing performance, spellbinding stuff, single take, no cuts, I did note, but his whole experience when he got to interrogate Hermann Goering at the Nuremberg trials, amazing. There's such a great backstory, and how he really thought he was accomplishing something for the impending Nuremberg trials, only to find out that his racist commanding officer only gave him that assignment to make the Nazis squirm at having to answer to a black man. And I love the description, like, my 400-page report with footnotes ended up in the trash. And yeah, it lays bare that different levels at which these characters are at socially. Like, the Italians will always have that one level up for having, precisely as we've seen with the quality of characters we're dealing with here, Dr. Senator clearly is I would say, has way more wits about him, has way more experience, has way better understanding of the world, but will never get the kind of opportunities that someone in Violante's position will get. In fact, we see in the latter couple of episodes, there's already talk of them seeking help from New York, meaning, the larger mafia, whereas the African Americans do not have those kind of resources. They've got to fend for themselves. So it is two completely different ball games. So this idea that the Italians are somehow just as hard done to, I think the show is gradually, it's getting to that point that actually these two things are not equal.
I liked he's like, tell them everything's okay, get a few more men if you can.
Yes, yeah.
But then won't they know that everything's
that was great stuff. Yeah, the back and forth from that scene was so funny. But Violante say, which is it? There's also, playing on that same theme about who is American and who isn't, this is something that Gaetano also brings up with Rabbi Milligan, because he's constantly dissing him for being Irish and making it quite plain to Rabbi Milligan, you're never going to be accepted here. And to which Rabbi Milligan responds, I'm American. And I thought that was quite interesting, that he's already recognised the fact that he's already been through 3 different identities. And it's like, well, I guess this is what being American is. At some point, you just sort of choose from your own history, and if you can't find one that works for you, then as long as you're white, in a sense, you can still just choose to be American. At this point, of course, in the history, it's ironic, because at this point, Irish people are still quite, certainly in this point in history and in this region of America, as we're seeing here, they are still discriminated against. So there's definitely layers of irony there, but Rabbi Milligan, you could say, is kind of before his time. We're being reminded again, there's different levels of being American, and there's different meanings about being American, and the rights and privileges of each level are rarely merit-based, and I think that's one of the key things here. Dr. Senator, obviously very smart, very charismatic. We learn he has a law degree, and he's a snappy dresser as well. Maybe not quite as snappy as Constant Calamita, but he's getting there. And he would seemingly be an asset to any organisation, but alas, he's a black man in the American Midwest in 1950, and so he's Loy Cannon's consigliere. Since we've mentioned Rabbi Milligan, we mentioned this earlier, this relationship with Satchel, I'm really intrigued about this. I feel like this is going to be one of my favourite relationships in the show. I'm enjoying how every time Rabbi Milligan leaves, he says, if I don't come back, I'm either dead or in prison. I like the grittiness that brings, and Rabbi Milligan, the character's doing a good job of embodying that sort of, not just the melting pot of cultures that I mentioned, but also the concurrent violence that sees cultures either radically changed or erased entirely from history. And it's almost like Rabbi Milligan, in a way, is kind of our most fatalistic existential character in a sense, because he's already accepting that as an eventuality. He's doing his best to pacify whomever he can, and he's trying his best to be a pacifying influence on Satchel. And I'm enjoying Ben Wishaw's performance, because he does have that constant hangdog expression. He looks like, so if you had to, again, it's like if a cartoonist had to draw an illustration of a really browbeaten man, it would be that expression. He's got a way of making his face droop slightly.
Yeah,
and I don't know how he does
he's always had that ability to make himself look like that though, like
Yeah.
even when he was Pingu and Nathan Barley.
Yeah. It's kind of ironic that his view of what's happening around him automatically makes him more mature, more level-headed, and way more capable of being a leader than either Giusto or Gaetano. But he will never be one, because the Italians would never accept it. Okay, moving on, I have to mention now what I think are two of my favourite characters of this show so far. And I think you're going to agree. The two fabulously named Zelmare Roulette and Swanee Caps.
Yeah.
Who are the Bonnie and Clyde, or Bonnie and Bonnie, I guess, of this season. When we were first introduced to them, when they're making their escape from prison, again, strong Raising Arizona vibes of the scene where John Goodman and Bill Forsyth escape. These characters are amazing. I suppose there's also Oh Brother, Where Art Thou vibes. Every time they're on screen together, I'm just going to come out and say these are two of the characters I'm most worried about. I'm going to prepare you, actually, James, because not having seen previous seasons, you will not know this, but Fargo has a bad habit of killing off your favourite characters.
Oh shit. I'm already pretty sure that Swanee Caps is going to die.
I mean, Ipecac should not kill you. It will make you very ill for a couple of days, but it won't kill you. It's no longer administered as a medicine, but back in the old days, it was one of those things that is administered to people who could not shit, basically. But it does severe things to your insides. So it will make you sick for a few days. I feel like Swanee will survive that, but I just don't know if the two of them are going to survive this season, and I'm so scared for them, because every single season of this show, I'm like, oh, I love this character so much. Please survive to the end. Please survive to the end. There's one in season 3, particularly, it was utterly gutting because they left it right to the end when I was so sure the character was going to get away. But these characters are great. They have so much. The two actresses have great chemistry. They've got some of the best lines in the show so far. I'm loving the chemistry with the Smutney family, because the Smutneys are so ordinary by comparison that having these two just unleash hell in their house and bring the law down upon them, and now it looks like they've also inadvertently brung the Cannon Gang down upon them. This is great shit, man. I'm really looking forward to where this is going, albeit at the same time being extremely trepidatious and worried about all the characters' fate.
They were such a weird injection into the show.
Yeah. There's already so much going on in this show. Like, on any other show, I'd be like, do we really need these characters at this point? But I was like, nah, these are great. A side note on the casting here, in the early stages of production on this show, or pre-production I should say, these characters were originally to be played by... Zelmare was going to be played by... I've actually forgotten the actress's name. She was Crazy Eyes in Orange is the New Black.
Oh, yeah. I know.
And Swanee was going to be played by Amber Mid-Thunder, who was Kerry Loudermilk in Legion. I'm kind of sad. Yeah, I'm kind of sad it's not. I'm kind of sad it's not Amber Mid-Thunder, because I love Amber Mid-Thunder. She's lovely, and she was great in Legion. But the actress playing Swanee Caps is doing a great job. So we've not lost anything really. But
are you aware of the controversy around Kelsey Asbill and her Native American heritage?
Yes, apparently her heritage is up for debate. She is part Chinese as well, and they do mention the character is part Chinese, so...
she has that brutal line about trying to fuck the Indian out of her or something.
There's actually something pretty devastating about the way her character just comes out with that dialogue in such a sort of throwaway fashion. You know that nobody who's been through that can do that without being seriously psychologically scarred. There's a lot going on there in the dialogue and also in the performance. I do think the actress is doing a great job. The controversy around her Native American heritage, yeah, I don't know what to say about it. It's for people who are not of our ethnicity to debate.
Yeah.
All I can say is she's doing a good job in the role.
She has commonly played Native American
I know,
characters,
I did see
it
that.
would be pretty weird if she wasn't.
Because this has happened before. You know, there have been plenty of actors in the past who've disingenuously posed as having Native American heritage. If we want to use a high-profile one, Johnny Depp's supposed Native American lineage has been massively debated.
Hey man, you ever done peyote?
The next character, man, so many great characters, so many vivid characters with wonderful names. Otis Weff, who I did not recognise Jack Houston in this role. After the first 2 episodes, I actually had to go and Google who Jack Houston played, because I was like, who's Jack Houston in this show? I was like, Otis Weff, who the fuck's that? He's the OCD cop? No way! He looks totally unrecognisable, and it's not because his appearance has changed, it's just because of his performance. He's doing so much physically that it's like, Yeah, I just did not recognise him.
Yeah, all his tics and stuff and his facial expressions.
Yeah.
He's completely unrecognisable.
It's the constant open mouth as well. His mouth is always open, which is the polar opposite of the role I most associate with him, which is Richard Harrow in Boardwalk Empire, who was constantly closed-mouthed and tight-faced. I'd only half-faced. So I just did not recognise him at all. I was like, totally different mannerisms. But hey, guys, I guess if you look up acting, that's the definition.
It's like he's pretending to be someone else.
I guess I'm just a bit slow. I didn't understand that's what acting was. But knock it out of the park. Another oddball character in a cast full of oddballs.
I'm really enjoying his weird pairing with Timothy Olyphant as well.
Yeah, I'm going to talk about Oliphant in a second. He's definitely one of my favourites as well. One of the things I wanted to mention, in fact, I guess this applies to Oliphant's character as well. Fargo normally has, in the previous seasons, a character who is an officer of the law, who is kind of a moral centre. And that's something all 3 seasons have had in common. And I guess it's been kind of a homage to the Frances McDormand character in the movie. This is the first season where we've got not one, but 2 quite shady officers of the law. And I did read an interview with Noah Hawley where he said he did purposely want to create a story this time round where the cops are not trustworthy, because we do live in a world where, for a lot of people, calling the cops is not always an option, and your experiences with the law can quite often be overwhelmingly negative, which I thought was quite interesting. So we've got these... We do not normally get 2 characters who are quite shady officers of the law, because Oliphant's character...
Yeah, they're shady in different ways as well, which is great.
Yeah,
and they're also
totally
shady at different levels of law enforcement. You know, you get like the kind of local detective,
yes,
and then the US Marshal, and they're both equally shady in different ways.
Yeah. Oliphant's character, I think, is really sinister when you start to consider his position and some of the shit he's coming out with. But the performance is so hilarious that it takes you a few minutes to kind of soak in the implications of all the facets of this character. First of all, his first appearance on this show, he's like sniffing things and fucking, it's like, wait, is this guy a human bloodhound? What the fuck's going on? Actually, this is something that Fargo does occasionally. It introduces elements where you start to think, is there something supernatural about this character? I think Noah Hawley is pushing the boat out more and more each season about the elements of what might or might not be supernatural. And I do feel there's an edge of that here with the fabulously named Dick Deafy Wickware with his selective deafness. But it's almost like he's playing a bizarro version of his role on Justified, where he's sort of time-travelled, he's become a lot more conservative, he's become a touch more racist, and 100 times more Mormon.
Now, there's a conversation he has with the police chief, where the chief mentions something about it was legal to kill a Mormon.
That's true. And do you know when that was repealed?
No.
Take a guess. When do you think that was repealed?
The 70s.
You're bang on. It was the mid-70s. This is fucking crazy. But yeah, it was a real thing. That was not a Hawleyism. But this fucking monologue that he has in that scene in the police chief's office about the 10 lost tribes of Israel, and it's all his long-winded way of introducing himself. And the police chief actually says, why did you not tell me you were a US Marshal at the start of the conversation? Why have I been sitting here listening to this? On another Twin Peaks reference, as he's sitting there gnawing on his carrots, I was getting some latter season 2 Ben Horn vibes.
I was fully getting that as well.
In that monologue, he also makes reference to a tenet of Mormonism which apparently is not much embraced now, which is about one of the tribes being cursed by God with skin of blackness. That apparently is not much talked about anymore, and apparently a lot of Mormon churches disown that. But Deafy Wickware here, fully endorsing it apparently, which makes me think, dude, you're not a good guy.
Did I ever tell you about my pal who became a Mormon?
I don't think so.
I don't know if it's suitable for the podcast. I don't know if this is suitable chat, but I've attended a Mormon baptism when one of my pals decided he wanted to be a Mormon. And it was fucking weird. I'll leave this bit in the podcast, but in terms of pure Alfred Hitchcock mise-en-scène 101, right? Mm-hmm. Before he went into the water to be baptised, they had him in a completely white suit. And then,
Wow.
after he came out, soaked, obviously, he had to go and change into a completely black suit.
Wow, that's incredible.
And then we watched a video about Jesus discovering America. Plus, I've also been to Salt Lake City, and that is a fucking weird place, man. Beautiful surroundings.
Mm-hmm. Peak topography.
Shame
Killer religious mentalism.
Shame about the city. You know how in RoboCop, Detroit is basically the OCP building and then just a wasteland around it?
Mm-hmm. Like the cursed earth.
Yeah.
That's a Judge Dredd reference for you kids.
Don't know if you noticed, but we like Judge Dredd in this show. Yeah, Salt Lake City was a bit like that, only it was Mormon temple in the middle, and then just like strip clubs and car showrooms. Pretty amazing. I wouldn't have assumed there was that many strip clubs in Salt Lake City, but we passed by several of them.
Yes, what can you say? One of the many things you can say about the USA, weird and wonderful place, and it really likes to juggle the sacred with the profane.
Oh, there is one thing. I was going to say his character, he is a total shitbag, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's one line he'd had, and again in episode 4.
I think I know the line. I was going to mention this line because I was nuts at it for fucking ages.
He says, I'll be back in a minute.
We're getting ahead of ourselves here. But it's the scene where Otis Weff and Davy Wickware, God, that name, Jesus Christ, are in the car together. Otis says, give me a minute, and he does his OCD of knocking against the door. And Davy says, is this the minute? There is another top law line shortly after that, which I'm going to get to in a minute because I was in stitches at it for ages. But Timothy Olyphant is absolutely bringing his A game here. He is a phenomenal actor. Is there anything he's ever been in that he's not just 100% compelling in?
Yeah, I don't think so, man. The guy is fucking great.
He's so good, man. I don't know about you, though. I did have this passing thought that when Otis Weff gets shackled with having to be shadowed by Deafy, I did have this thought, is this team up of two massive oddballs a bit too much? And maybe it will get to be a bit too much, but so far I'm really loving the ride.
I can see maybe why some people or some critics might think it's a bit much. But I'm not saying we're better than those critics, Craig. But I'm pretty sure that our...
All I've got to say to those critics is, do you even Fargo, bro?
Yeah, our televisual tastes and stuff, lean towards let's throw the oddballs together and see what happens.
This is definitely our wheelhouse. I think that's fair to say. Yeah. I think that extra layer of Otis Weff being in the pocket of Josto, that's going to result in even more, it's going to be this increased stress I can't imagine the state that Otis Weff is going to get into by the end of this season. It's going to be great stuff. I should say that monologue that Timothy Olyphant has, and also kind of going back to the monologue that Dr. Senator has as well, this is something Fargo does a lot. Characters do sermonize and launch into these verbose monologues quite often. This is the kind of thing that I think viewers either love or hate, and I can understand why some people get really turned off by this. I can get sometimes turned off by stuff like this in other shows, but Fargo always works for me because I think, again, it just has that sense of its own absurdity at all times. Mm-hmm. It never lets itself get too serious. In a way, it's kind of the anti-True Detective for me, because True Detective takes its own existentialism so seriously. And the dialogue in True Detective quite often posts cringe, bro.
True Detective was a show that was absurd in a way that it was not trying to be.
Yeah, I had no conception of how hilarious it unintentionally became, particularly in season 2. Some of those monologues in season, Jesus Christ, man. I did see many parodies of them with people inserting park life.
Now, there's actually one of the rare shows that I gave up on without finishing a season. I did not finish season 2 of True Detective. I just had to jack it in after like 3 episodes. I
finished season 2, but I really wish I hadn't, because it was not worth it. Season 3 is actually not bad, by the way, but again, it's a show that really takes itself so seriously. Season 3 is decent. It's got God, what's the actor's name? Great actor from Moonlight.
Bruce Willis.
Not Moonlighting. He was Cottonmouth Luke Cage. What's his fucking name?
I know.
Great actor. Yeah. Consult the Hamilton. Kick myself in the dick when I find his name on the Hamilton here.
You mean you'll kick yourself in the dick when you realize you couldn't remember Mahershala Ali?
Mahershala Ali, yes. Thank you, Hamilton.
You mean Mahershala Ali, also known as Blade?
Oh yeah, he's Blade now as well.
He's going to be Blade, yeah. It's going to be fucking amazing.
You know, for two guys making a pop culture podcast, you know fuck all.
Mahershala Ali is going to be finding out what motherfuckers can ice skate uphill.
I actually look forward to that. I do like when the MCU employs solid character actors in these roles. It usually works out pretty well. But this is not an MCU podcast, as we said earlier.
Anyway, we're going to get to
Fargo in a minute. We're going to get back to Fargo in a minute.
We'll get back to Fargo in a second. Can I just say, as a podcast, we're bizarrely dismissive of Noah Hawley because we forgot to mention Legion in our first episode, and it took us 2 hours to get to talking about.
And we still haven't talked about Legion. I know. We are going to have to devote an episode to Legion at some point. That's the only way this is going to work. Full disclosure: we had planned to talk a wee bit about Legion because of its connection to Fargo, and we're both big fans of Legion. Let's face it, we have wasted more than enough of your time on this podcast. So. Now we're going to get back to talking about Fargo, to the tune of Billy Joel. The Deafy leads the raid on the Smutney's home in a bid to track down Zelmer, believing correctly, as it turns out, that she and Swanee have sought refuge at the Smutney's home. This whole raid sequence, I really loved this. There was some top fun here. Oh, before we get to that, by the way, a precursor to this, because episode 2 leaves us on the cliffhanger of the raid about to happen, and also the double cliffhanger of Nurse Orietta Mayflower leaving the Ipecac pie on the doorstep. Did you notice when it pans back to the street, there is this dark figure in the street?
Yes, I did.
What gives, bro? What was your thoughts about that before you'd seen any subsequent episodes?
I thought Noah was doing as a Holly.
Yeah, well, he's 100% doing a Holly, and I think that's been hammered home with episode 4. But yeah, this is another one of those. When I saw that dark figure, I was like, oh, here we go. Here's the hint of the supernatural. I got to say, what we got in episode 4 was way more smack in the supernatural face than this show usually does. But I'll get to that in a second. Let's get back to this raid. So, Timothy Oliphant is giving it maximum Oliphant all the way through this scene. It's a fucking joy to watch. And I'm loving Thurman Smutney, the Undertaker, awkwardly holding this pie above his head. It's great physical comedy. It just undercuts the drama. It's great shit. Otis Weff, clearly stressed out as nut, wanting to be rid of this guy, has to lead the deputies down into the morgue, hoping to find that the two fugitives are hiding in there. They find a rotten corpse. They all freak out and leave. And I love the way that the Swanee and Zelmer were just hiding in the last drawer.
Yeah.
In any other show, I'd be like, come on, man. That's cheap. But I was like, nah, that's fine. So he just comes up and says, yeah, more's clear. Now, Deafy tries to be a bit of a hard ass here with Ethel Reader, tries to do a bit of psychological bullying. This whole scene with Zelmer and Swanee are peeking around the corner, aiming the rifle at him.
Yep.
I was getting, once again, full on Raising Arizona vibes at that point.
I genuinely thought that they were just going to kill him off.
I was on the fence. I was like, he could just boldly kill off Timothy Oliphant in this scene. Did not go that way. It all kind of settled down. I did enjoy, after he hears Debrell, who's Ethel Reader's mother, say that if I ever see my sister again, she'll have hell to pay kind of thing. Giving it her most convincing possible. And let's face it, Debrell does have problems with her sister, so it was not wholly an act. Do you think Deafy actually bought it? Or did he just realise he was not getting anywhere?
I think that he just realised that he wasn't getting anywhere. Because
that was my read as well.
He knew there was 5 places set at that table.
Yes, yeah, and he's clearly not an idiot.
Nothing she would have said could undercut the fact that there was clearly 2 more people in the house.
Yeah, there's also the very obvious rearranging of things when he first enters, and Ethel Reader and Debrell are at the kitchen counter saying, we're just acting all innocent here. This is the innocence kitchen.
He knows they're still there because when Otis basically frames the fact that they've gone to Chicago, he's like, nah, I'm going to stick around here. It's like, yeah, he knows they're still in town.
Right, not you know what also I loved about that scene though, is clearly that Otis Weff is so fucking not with it that he doesn't even understand what a US Marshal does. Because there's no reason why Deafy would leave. because he's been assigned specifically to this scene, because, you know, the whole point is, yeah, as you say, yeah, he's not been shaken off the trail. But I love Otis Weff's complete obliviousness. Think, oh, I'll just feed him a story and he'll be gone. It's like, that's not how this is going to work, man. Also, we have to make mention of, we are jumping ahead to episode 4 here, but that whole... that pantomime he gets that guy to do is like, oh yeah, I overheard these two women talking about...
You know, just regular talk. No, but you said they went...
Yeah, I believe you said they were talking about going to Chicago. Yeah, it's just the level of obliviousness and the level of complete ineptitude. But also like Otis Weff's complete confidence in himself that was good enough. Okay, getting back to the canons for a second. Lemuel. I like Lemuel, who's Loy's oldest son. I like him because he's a jazz guy.
Yeah.
And he's got a jazz driver. I think I missed actually the driver's name. I can't remember, but the driver is played by Jeremy Harris, who was Ptonomy in Legion.
Yeah. Do you know what? It took me a minute to place him.
But as a jazz weirdo, I quite enjoyed the scenes of Lemuel and his driver in the car, digging Dizzy Gillespie. That was all good shit. I got very worried though when it seemed like one of them might be killed. I was like, no, come on, I'm digging these jazz guys, don't kill them off.
That was another really good building of tension.
Yeah, for sure. So in episode 3, we realise what Zelmir and Swanee's play is. Zelmir is going to attempt to pay off the debt on behalf of Debrel to the cannons, but she's going to do it by robbing the cannons. Which is great. That's just great. Typical of Fargo's brand of irony. Now, I like that they sort of make Thurman complicit here, because he has to drive them in his truck with... Actually, that's a point, actually. Why is the mortuary called the King of Tears? Did you notice that?
Because it's a cool name, obviously.
But it's got the King of Tears emblazoned, and it's like, if anybody catches you, dude, you're doomed. But anyway, they get to what is effectively the Cannon's safe house, and they begin the robbery scene. There is this, what I noted was a very obvious reference to Raising Arizona, where the guy there says to Zelmir, you've got a panty on your head, which is exactly what someone says to Nicolas Cage at some point in Raising Arizona.
That was pretty great.
So by the time they get there, we're also... Swanee is already... Yeah, the Epicac has kicked in, and Swanee is having a rough time of it. So we're back to the fart jokes. And at this point, I was starting to think, is this becoming less Coen Brothers and more Farrelly Brothers? And it only escalates, because farts become voms. We get a hardcore vom scene. Swanee just vomits everywhere, all over the money, all over everything. And I like the fact that all of the guys there are less inclined to intervene, purely because of Swanee vomiting everywhere. It's like, nah, I'm good.
But I love how we see then from episode 4 that the vomiting all over the money is an intrinsic plot device. Yeah,
exactly. It's going to play a major role in the following episodes. Yeah, that's classic Holly. So we get this robbery, and we also get Gaetano decides to take charge, and he decides he's going to take out Loy Cannon's oldest son. So these two things happen concurrently. There's so much going on here. I mean, Gaetano is such an idiot. I mean, Josto isn't much better. But this plan is a bad plan. I mean, this is literally just about to start a war, as Rabbi Milligan correctly calls Constant Calamita out for it. Calamita, I loved him in this scene though, full-on menace. I really was quite sure that somebody was going to die in this scene. Nobody died, but it was all well staged. The tension was great.
Sorry, I've just remembered who Constance Calamito reminds me of, particularly in that scene. Reminded me of the scene in Scarface, where the guy's going to bomb the family in the car.
Oh, yes. Yeah,
and
there was a lot
Al
of that.
Pacino kills him. That was totally what I had in my head at that point.
Yeah, you're right. That is exactly the same vibe. That's a good call. So again, we see Rabbi Milligan once again trying to be the pacifier. Probably the most extreme example so far. And he's putting himself in danger by doing this, because who knows how either side might react to this. I mean, he's doing it with... I mean, it turns out to be the correct assumption that this is Gaetano's call, that Josto wouldn't call this. So I guess he's just banking on the fact that he can keep Josto in his own good books kind of thing, that he can still have some kind of influence over Josto. Josto is so all over the place at the moment that seems like... I suppose there is a gamble there, but it turned out to be the best call. But the canons, meanwhile, interpret both these things as acts of aggression by Josto, which really complicates things for the next episode. And when episode 3 ended, I was like, are we just going to get a full-scale war in the next episode? Because that seems like it's going to blow its load a bit early in the season. It seems like that's still going to happen at some point, but yeah, it turned out not to be. It's delayed slightly anyway. And as we see in episode 4, there are some other things going on here that really complicate matters, involving our aforementioned Nurse Mayflower. I'm going to pause at this moment, James, because I think it's time for a bar break. My round, isn't it? Oh, back from the bar. From the bar.
Glad we took that bar break there. I was getting somewhat parched. Gave me time to export my audio from the last recording section, though.
McEwen's Export. Does anybody drink McEwen's Export now?
Shout out to McEwen's Brewery.
Yep, shout out to McEwen's Brewery. Other lagers are available, I think. I don't know. Certainly IPAs are available.
I heard, correct me if I'm wrong, I heard a rumour, not a Bananarama song. It is a Bananarama song.
Is this an episode of Umbrella Academy?
That apparently you're supposed to drink IPA at room temperature.
Really?
Yeah. Like, who the fuck would drink room temperature beer deliberately? Anyway, let's talk about season 4 of Fargo.
We're going to start the Fargo again to the tune of Billy Joel. So episode 3 ended on quite an uncertain note, which I guess is something we could also say about episode 4, and it seems like it's going to be a running theme. But there was a lot of things left in the balance on that episode. So yeah, there's quite a serious, quite a dark vibe to the end of that episode. One of the things I was left hanging with that was resounding in my head for the last week before I watched the most recent episode. We referenced it a wee bit earlier. The scene in the kitchen at the Putneys, while Swanee is wolfing down Nurse Orietta Mayflower's ipecac cake, there is this conversation going on where Zelmer mentions a curse that follows the Roulette family from Mississippi, and there's this idea that Swanee actually has an interesting line where she says, people think houses are haunted, but it's not, it's people that are haunted. And Zelmer mentions something about, you know, there being a debt to the devil and this kind of thing. And that's one of these moments where I do feel like Holly is amping up the sinister and the supernatural in this scene. It's not, I don't think it is just meant to be on the allegorical level. And I was already getting that sense in this scene. And it does segue into when Swanee starts giving that anecdote about her father. Oh, by the way, side note, I did notice when Swanee refers to her father, she calls him a Chinaman, and it did bring me a bit of a flashback to The Big Lebowski, and I heard John Goodman's voice in my head saying that's not the correct nomenclature. But
Shut the fuck up, Donnie.
He did work on the railroads. But as this, she mentions that he slept with a coyote who tricked him in his sleep. And there's no further explanation to that, but I did love that line. And in a lot of Native American cultures, the coyote is seen as a kind of a trickster spirit. So Holly is amping this stuff up in this scene. And I was left with this hanging over me for the last week. I thought, yeah, he definitely wants to think there's something, if not supernatural, there's something very fatalistic hanging over this family. And it's making me super, super worried about every member of that family, which horrifies me because I really enjoy every member of that family, including the extended family of Zelmer and Swanee. So there's also that sinister detail where Swanee talks about her father's habit of hugging her around the neck too hard. What did that mean?
It's pretty dark.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there that needs to be unpacked at some point, or perhaps might not even be. Holly being Holly, he might not unpack it. So yeah, a lot of dark things I was left with at the end of episode 3, but I cannot finish talking about episode 3 without mentioning one of the most memorable scenes in which Orietta Mayflower sees Josto outside the hospital where he's stalking the administrator, and she thinks he's there stalking her. Gets into the car. He has no idea at this point who she is. And she essentially starts jacking him off in the car while singing the Battle Hymn of the Republic. And that is peak Fargo at this point. That is Fargo at its most Fargo. It's like, yo dog, we heard you liked Fargo, so we put some Fargo in a jacking off scene while singing the Battle Hymn of the Republic.
Oh man, that was great.
I love Jason Schwartzman's delivery. What did you say your name was again? And her just so fully confident, saying, oh, you jokester. So, episode 4, which at the time of recording is our most recent episode. I'm going into this episode thinking all of this stuff about curses and whatnot, That's playing heavily on my mind. And the first scene we get this episode is seemingly a nightmare that Ethel Reader has, where she seems to be sitting writing a letter, and then hears like kind of scraping at the door or kind of rustling. Goes out there and there's this apparition at the top of the stairs. You know what's freaky about this? I started this podcast talking about the haunting of Bly Manor, and not to spoil anything, but visually this is very similar to something that appears in the haunting of Bly Manor, to the extent when I saw it here I was like, hey, wait a minute. I did get freaked out. But yeah, it almost looks like a kind of semi-frozen corpse, reanimated, features kind of filed off. It's the most horror that Fargo has ever gotten. So as a Fargo virgin, you wouldn't have appreciated that, but Fargo has never gotten this explicitly into the realm of horror. This is something new for sure. And it's not the last we see of this figure in this episode, which I was double bowled over by.
Because there's the other kind of quote unquote dream sequence.
Right, and it does not appear to be a dream though. It seems like to be Zelmir seems to be aware. So I will paint the scene. She's up there washing the money to get rid of the puke smell from where Swanee spewed all over the cash. She's washing it all in the bathtub. She's pinning it all up on clothes pegs around the hotel room. Swanee is lying in the bed recovering, and then this figure emerges from the bathwater in a full-on horror movie, really chilling in the way it staged, a really chilling scene. I don't know about you, I was really, the hairs on the back of my neck were standing way up.
It was really fucking unnerving, which is what we've talked about this before, but I think on the podcast actually, the unnerving horror.
This is exactly the kind of thing I expected from Lovecraft Country and did not get. And it's not the kind of thing I expected from Fargo. This scene here where this figure just drifts past Zelmir and seems to walk towards Swanee, all of this was so chilling, and the kind of phantom rain that comes down, and the rain gets muddy, and so much really powerful imagery in there that from something that, in terms of how it staged, is really simple in terms of its execution. But Zelmir seems to stand there in fear with her eyes shut, like not wanting to look at it. And we are jumping ahead in the episode, but since we've talked about the opening, I think it's important to talk about it here. Zelmir seems fully aware of what this thing is, and she also seems to think that Swanee is aware of what it is, because she goes over after this thing is passed, and she seems really scared. And by the way, I was fucking scared that Swanee had passed away in her sleep at this point.
Yeah.
Shakes her awake, and I don't know if you caught what she says to Swanee. She says, "Mean old Mr. Snowman, he does that sometimes." So I have no idea what the hell that means, right? But this whole idea, going back to the conversation about there being a curse that follows the Roulette family, it seems like it could be an embodiment of guilt in a way, given that the figure rises from the bathtub where the money was washed, like her trying to cleanse herself of the guilt of her crime, maybe. Or maybe it's just a coincidence that emerges from, I mean, it has to emerge from somewhere, so why not the bathtub? Who knows? All I know is the way this was directed and put together gave me the absolute shivers. And yeah, it does not happen to me very often. I really found this a chilling scene. And the fact that it's not explained is one of those moments where it's just, that makes it, the unexplained, the inexplicable makes it more powerful.
Yeah, I thought it was like a dream sequence or like a sort of daydream kind of thing, like a David Lynch style, just like a vision. You can't see what I just did with my hand there.
You were doing the David Lynch.
I did the David Lynch hand.
Yeah. The finger by finger wave.
Being, as you so delicately put it, a Fargo virgin as I am, and having experienced 3 seasons.
Hashtag Fargin.
But coming to watch Fargo from my only Noah Hawley experience being 3 seasons of Legion, I just kind of expect weird shit to happen.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, this kind of thing is not usually as full on as this. The closest we've gotten to this so far is something that happens in season 2. Happens near the start of the very first episode of season 2, and then again in the final episode. I'm not going to say what it is because I do not want to spoil anything. Season 2, by the way, for me is my favourite season of Fargo so far.
Okay.
That scene, that phenomenon of which I am speaking, really split the fans though. Some people hate it because they think it was a bit too much. I personally loved it because it's not actually confirmed that it is what it appears to be. Hawley does leave a lot of room for us to interpret that it could have been something, that there could have been a more quote-unquote logical explanation. Whether or not he does the same thing here, hard to say, but this seems so intrinsically linked to these characters that I feel like it's got to come back. I don't see this being the only the only time this pops up. It's got to come back, which is definitely going to push this season of Fargo way more into explicit horror territory than any of the previous seasons.
What they both need to do, in my honest opinion, is start memorising What by Captain Sensible to defend themselves against this sort of intrusion.
Yeah, that's clearly the key. That's a Legion reference for you kids. Alright, so away from that horror set piece, the other big set piece we get at the start of the episode is Constant Calamita, who is now running guns into town on behalf of Gaetano. He gets hijacked by some of Loy Cannon's men. Now, this scene is so absurd. None of this makes any sense, right? This ring of fire around the truck.
But he doesn't just drive through.
I don't understand why Calamita just doesn't drive through it. Also, considering that the cannon gang seem to walk through the fire, and then they also throw the other guy into the fire who burns instantly. There's a lot of throwing logic out the window in this scene, but whatever. Hey, we've just seen a zombie at the top of the stairs or whatever, so it's cool, whatever. We'll just roll with it. But there's a lot here that didn't make sense. I did quite enjoy, though, knowing how fastidious Constant Calamita is with his appearance, that the guy chose to scar his face with the barrel of the rifle. Thought that was a nice touch. Calamita not showing any reaction to pain, but knowing that, he's got to be absolutely gutted that his beautiful face has been flawed in this way. But the logistics of how that fire works, if anybody can let us know exactly. Oh, you're a Dungeons & Dragons guy, James. Is there some kind of spell at work here?
They could have cast Wall of Fire, which the heat exudes from a wall of fire in one direction.
Not the band.
Not the band, the other one. So it could have been forcing all the heat specifically one way so that you can burn into it, but then you could come through from the other side and not be affected by it.
First of all, gay. Second of all, stupid.
Chevy Chase, thanks for that.
Alright, so when Josto learns via Rabbi Milligan about this unauthorised attempt on Lemuel's life, he opts for a bit of a confrontation of his own against Gaetano. So this is where we do see Josto does have a spine here, and he can be quite aggressive and he can take control when he wants to. So he's definitely been pushed a bit too far. Now, I don't know about you, I'm starting to think, is his relationship with Orietta at this point giving him a bit more strength, giving him a bit more balls, if you will?
Or maybe it's just the cocaine.
Well, that will certainly help.
Cocaine's a hell of a drug.
I wonder if arc-wise he's just been pushed to that breaking point where he's realising that no one is giving a fuck about his leadership. So he's having to, he's starting to crack a little and maybe just harden. But either way, I thought that was a pretty good turn from Jason Schwartzman.
Yeah, I did as well. And we get to see... I mean, Josto's clearly a flawed character, but he's a complex one. And, people can be both inept and have moments where they're in charge. That's not unusual. Real people are complex, and it's... I don't think there's anything unrealistic about the way this character swings back and forth. I think it's perfectly within a spectrum that's reasonable. When he starts shooting up the place and then threatened to shoot Gaetano's balls off, I quite enjoyed that. That was good stuff. He needs to be careful, Gaetano, because if his eyeballs roll out his head, it looks like he's going to have zero balls of any kind. Speaking of Josto's relationship with Orietta, we do get that spectacular sex scene between the two of them.
Yeah, that was
with
amazing.
The autoerotic asphyxiation. Yeah, it's a less than conventional romance, I think we can say. But one of the things I really enjoyed about this scene is Orietta showing her romantic side, which she seems to be 100% invested in. And she does have this segue she goes off on about Istanbul and how even the name Istanbul is romantic. And she says that's where they shot Casablanca, to which Josto replies, I think you'll find they shot Casablanca and Casablanca. What's doubly funny about that is they're both wrong. Casablanca was filmed entirely in Burbank, California, so it does kind of add an extra layer of neither of these people quite comprehend the reality that they're trying to navigate, but they both have full confidence that they think they do. Jessie Buckley, again, some of her delivery here, like chiding Josto for his use of swear words. It's like, lady, you're fucking insane. Yeah, the chemistry between these two actors, I think, is on point. This is great. This is where, actually, I think we're starting to see the rewards of these particular casting choices. Now that we're seeing those two actors together a bit more, it's like, yeah, this is this is phenomenal. This is the 1950s Midwest Fred and Rosemary West.
A harsh choice, but accurate.
So meanwhile, we get the continuing adventures of Otis with his shadow in the shape of Timothy Oliphant's Deafy Wickware. The awkward banter between them at full force. So Otis Weft gets called to Joplin's department store because he's got some errands to perform for the fadas. He insists that Deafy sit outside. And of course Gaetano and Calamita come out and Deafy cannot help himself. He has to go out and confront them. And he does the bit of the wind-up here, and he tells the story about, back where I came from, we had some Italians that visited, and effectively we lynched them. Yeah. Which is an appalling story, made all the more appalling for the fact that it's not even made clear that these particular Italians were even criminals. He just says Italians. Yeah. So I'm like, But my favourite line, and this is a line I was referring to earlier that absolutely burst me, is that he says to them, so what is it goes on in here? And they're absolutely not giving anything away. And Deafy says, if a fella's pud needed tugged, would this be the place for said tugging? It was all in the delivery, but it was absolutely fantastic. I was pissing myself at that for about 10 minutes.
That was fucking great.
Yeah, so it's definitely hammering home that Deafy is not going to be a pushover. He's going to be a real thorn in Otis Weft's side, and thus he's really going to cause problems for the fadas. So this is complicating matters on all fronts, and it's again just one of those cases that obviously Deafy senses something is not right with Otis, and so he's just like, well, I'm going to get to the bottom of this because that's just the detective side. Whether or not it's because he suspects he might have some connection with what's going on with Zelmare, maybe that's a misinterpretation on his part that could have hilarious results down the line. Anything is possible in this show, and the existential casualty of it all. But I'm just loving there's all these different layers of people not quite understanding what other people are saying, knowing that people are hiding things, misinterpreting what those things might be. This is one of the things this show does really well, and to have this, the quality of actors in this season is so great that I'm just, every time a new cast member comes up against another, I'm like, this is just a delight to watch. Because we have to talk then about another character I'm now seriously worried about, is Ethelreda. So we already know that Orietta picked her as her pet project. Say that 3 times fast. So she now turns up, and she's now insisting that she be Orietta's housekeeper, essentially. And she even ups the going rate, which I quite enjoyed.
Yeah, I liked her negotiation.
This was great stuff. The chemistry between these two actors as well is so great. And basically let's get to the nub of this. Orietta... I thought this was classic. Yeah, I'm going to make a Simpsons reference here. Spoiler, Simpsons reference coming in here. Spoiler for a 20-odd-year-old Simpsons reference. When Orietta is showing her around the apartment, it's the way she shuts the closet door, says, don't worry about that. Like, it just reminded me of an episode of The Simpsons where Chief Wiggum is talking about Ralph going into his closet. And he says, what is this strange fascination with my forbidden closet of mystery? So it's exactly what this reminded me of. It's like, why did you even mention the closet? It's like you've just invited a teenager into your home and you're going to expect them not to look in that closet now. So obviously Ethelreda gets the place absolutely spick and span and inevitably finds herself drawn to the closet.
Yep. It's the big red do not press button.
Exactly. So she goes in there, she stumbles upon all the various medicines that Orietta has been effectively using to euthanize her patients. And she's also got a box full of news clippings about all of their deaths. She also has trophies, including the Fada ring, the Firewalk With Me ring. And it's like, okay, we now have it confirmed. Orietta Mayflower is officially a very prolific serial killer.
She is. Well, you said the Fred and Rose West, but she's the Harold Shipman of Fargo.
Yeah, absolutely. She's the proto-Shipman. Yeah, this is... I did not expect Orietta to have been quite so steeped in the world of euthanasia at this point. I was figuring, okay, she's probably done it before. But no, this is full-on Shipman. There's a massive catalogue of death here. And we know Ethelreda well enough at this point to know she's going to quickly put 2 and 2 together. Why she's chosen to take a trophy, though, I'm a bit uneasy about it. So I feel like Ethelreda, you did not think that through. Like, she took the ring home with her. All of this spells bad news.
It's not going to end well.
Here's the thing, though. The fact it's the Fada ring she took.
Somehow, from her, the Fada ring is going to end up in Loy's possession.
That's what I think is going to happen, because we're getting ahead of ourselves, but what's going to happen is Loy Cannon is going to send somebody around to the Smutneys, and they might find the Fada ring, and that's going to add a whole other layer of new misinterpretations. This kind of writing is exactly what Noah Hawley is brilliant at, and it's just watching the dominoes fall and not quite being able to tell which direction they might fall. I wonder also if Ethelreda will put two and two together and realise that Orietta also poisoned the pie. Because I'm not sure. Well, maybe she didn't. I guess she didn't see.
She didn't see the results because they went straight to a hotel afterwards. Like,
yeah,
and even the farting didn't start until they were in the back of the truck. So
either way, Ethelreda's certainly smart enough to know what's going on here. The fact she left her notebook behind, her journal, that's a classic. It's a classic mistake. It's like, no, come on. But I'm going to forgive Holly for opting for a cliche there. It's obviously necessary that Orietta learns that Ethelreda knows her secret. So that's definitely going to complicate that relationship. What's your prediction? How is Orietta going to react to this?
I think it could go one of two ways. I think she'll either try and kill her, which to me seems a bit obvious.
Seems a bit obvious, yeah.
Or...
is she going to try and convince her that this could be a joint project?
That was my next thought, because her interest in Ethel is very much she's like, oh, you're very smart. She's like, I think she might try and convince her to be an apprentice to her.
Yeah,
serial killing euthanasia.
The only way I can see that working is if she had some kind of leverage over Ethelreda, and it doesn't seem like she does. So, and I can't see Ethelreda just suddenly being on board with serial killing. So, although she could surprise us, you never know. But I don't know. The more I try and interrogate that, I can't come up with I just can't even come up with a clear prediction. God damn it, Holly.
One thing's for sure, they're going to get together and sing a Pink Floyd song at some point.
That's another Legion reference for you kids. Certainly things are getting complicated for the Roulette family now, because everything is now descending on them. Orietta is going to descend on them, and as we now learn, the Cannon Gang are going to descend on them, because in the meantime, Zelmir has given the money she stole from the Cannons to give to Thurman, to give back to Loy Cannon as a way of repaying the debt. This was beautifully played, I thought, this scene where Chris Rock notices the smell. There's just something about the physicality of his performance was just so great. You just see him putting two and two together going, fuck you, son of a bitch. But I feel like he's got to know that Thurman is not clever enough to try and put this together, but obviously he's got no conception of who the middle players might be. But either way, the Cannons are coming to the Smutneys, Orietta is coming to the Smutneys, it's going to be a party at the Smutneys, and I really enjoyed with the full irony of Thurman Smutney saying to Debrell and Ethelreda, it's sigh of relief o'clock round at the Smutneys house. Like, no, man.
I'm super excited for the next episode. Like I said, I'm really enjoying this show so far. It's making me want to watch the other seasons.
Yeah.
And I guess Noah Hawley can do no wrong.
Seems that way. He's never let me down. There's parts of the previous Fargo seasons that maybe are a wee bit uneven in places, but I come away from each of those seasons feeling satisfied.
There's your Fargo, guys. We got around to starting the Fargo.
So
I imagine if it keeps up this level of quality, we're going to come back to it in a few episodes' time.
We're definitely going to be... Well, here's what I think what might be worth doing. For our next episode, we're going to be doing the Lovecraft Country wrap-up. I think we could probably combine it with a Fargo episode, depending on how much we talk about Lovecraft Country.
To be fair, we've talked about Lovecraft Country a lot. Do we want to do 3 hours of us saying the same things we've already said?
I don't think so, because I think a lot of it we will be underlining how most of our feelings about the show have culminated or been subverted in some way in that final episode, and that'll probably be the... I mean, we might go into a bit more detail about some of the later episodes with maybe things we missed, but by and large, I think it's going to be... It's probably going to be a bit more concise than the previous ones, so I reckon we can combine some Fargo commentary with that in the next episode.
So there you go, you heard it here first. Next episode, episode 7 of fSobriety, we're going to do a Lovecraft Country wrap-up, and we're going to talk a bit more about Fargo, and then get round, finally...
Oh, yeah, listen, for you guys who have listened to our Mr. Robot rewatch part 1, and are keen for more of that, thank you for your patience. We are getting back to that. We have not forgotten. We are very passionate about that. We will be getting back in about it. So the plan is, episode after next, we will be back on Mr. Robot rewatch territory.
Yep. I realised that, given that our podcast is named after, like, a pun based on something from Mr. Robot, we've talked a lot about Lovecraft Country.
Would be a bit rum if we'd spent it all talking about Lovecraft Country and Fargo, or indeed everything but either of those things, as we did for the first third of this podcast.
So rest assured, next episode, we're going to have Lovecraft Country wrap-up and a bit more Fargo. The episode after that, we're talking episode 2 recap, Mr. Robot.
All right, folks.
How's your wine looking right now?
My wine, James, one might say I've consumed around 50%.
Or to put it another way,
that is half the bottle.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
See you next time. Cheers for now.
fSobriety, Episode 6, We Didn't Start the Fargo, was conceived by Craig Woods and James Hamilton, edited by James Hamilton, and is a production of Half the Bottle. The theme music is Colossal Estates by Errors, available on Rock Action Records. If you enjoyed this episode, why not tell a friend about it, and don't forget to check out all of the links in the episode description. While you're on the internet, why not follow us on Twitter at fSobrietyCast, and Facebook, at fSobriety Podcast, and on YouTube at youtube.com/fSobrietyPodcast. Some motherfuckers are always trying to ice skate uphill.
I've watched this guy just shoot women in the face and pull out women's pliers. Pull out women's pliers? let me rephrase that. This is only 2 glasses of wine and Jesus Christ. Oh, wait, James. Is this an episode of fSobriety?
Yes, it is. Let's cue the music. Oh fuck, that's amazing.
Yeah, no, I legit did not have that planned. It just, as soon as you said it, I thought there's got to be a way we can segue into this.